This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
It's 3 minutes after 10. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. And it's one of those mornings where we try to float above the news agenda and rather than focus on a specific, if you like, we focus on a bigger. Do you know what we're going to do? We're going to go a bit meta. So when I was a kid, we didn't go on foreign holidays much. My dad took me to France when I was 6. We stayed in sort of bars, really. It was an amazing holiday, a real treat. But that was the first time I ever went abroad. I didn't fly until I was 11 or 12. But the biggest holiday we went on involved driving all the way through France and Spain to the Costa Brava. I remember going through the Pyrenees. And it's funny the things you notice when you're a kid. I always remember some Spanish kids running out into the road and shouting "Inglesi car" or something like that. Or what's the Spanish word for car? And they were just excited to recognise the number plate. Dad had probably taken a slightly obscure route on reflection. But I remember how bumpy the roads were, particularly in Spain. I remember being actually surprised that the roads we were driving down were little more than tracks. If you visit continental Europe now, and I spend most of my time in Greece when I am in continental Europe, and obviously European Union funded investment in infrastructure there, albeit that a lot of the big roads are tolls now, you pay to be on them, are extraordinary. I mean, they're just fantastic. But I don't know why. I don't do motoring topics on this programme, as you know, for two reasons. Number one, they're mind-numbingly dull. And number two, I'm not really qualified to comment. I didn't learn to drive until I was in my 30s. And apart from a sort of brief flare-up when I was about 11, I never really had the petrol gene. I was never really that interested in cars. So I don't normally use road experiences as an illustration of anything. But you notice the potholes, right? You notice the state of the country in a variety of ways, sometimes micro, sometimes macro. So the state of the roads. You know, even Rod Stewart, I think it was Rod Stewart, wasn't it? Even Rod Stewart took it upon himself to start filling in some of the potholes in his neck of the woods. It may have been a private road. It's often the case if you've got a fancy gaff. But there are plenty of public roads where we cannot quite believe the state of the surface. We can't quite believe the state of the surface. And that's micro. That's quite little. I know that potholes can cause accidents, but we don't really think of them as one of the major threats to our safety. What about the prisons being full? Whether you are going to chalk it up as a consequence of COVID and just not wonder why this hasn't happened in lots of other countries where they also had COVID, or whether you're going to recognise it as another consequence of 14 years of absolute nonsense. And you look at the hospitals. You look at the shortages of staff. You look at the length of the waiting list. You look at the schools, which are not, I think it's fair to say, as a consequence of 14 years of Tory rule, but as a consequence of a bigger picture, the concrete situation, the RAC sees schools literally in danger of falling down. But morale, staffing, investment has plummeted over the last 14 years. And you look at everything really in this country, and I think you, without having to be the man who wrote a book called How They Broke Britain, you recognise that things are pretty broken. Actually, I've just written something for an academic book, a sort of annual academic book for politics students that draws on some of the stuff in How They Broke Britain and updates it. And what struck me while doing that was the so I've got a little frog in my throat. Can I get some water, please? Was the fact that most of the Conservative Party contenders, the leaders for the Conservative Party, the contenders for the Conservative Party leadership were talking about Britain being broken as well. Now that's surreal, right? You've literally only just got out of power. And you are describing the country that you are that you have literally just stopped running for 14 years, for a decade and a half. Various iterations of your party have been in charge for a decade and a half, and you're describing it as broken. You're describing yourself as the person to fix things. There's a moment of madness there that is probably worth reflecting on just for a moment. just for a second. You've been in charge for a decade and a half, and you're competing with each other on who's going to make the best job of fixing the mess that the country is in. Rishi Sunak's pretty much the only person who tries to argue that the country wasn't in a mess, but everybody knows that the only reason he called such an early election was because he knew that things were going to get even messier the longer he waited. So we're living in a country where everybody knows that everything feels broken. Oh, I hate saying that because it feels almost disloyal. It doesn't feel unpatriotic. It feels disloyal, doesn't it? To say that everybody knows that everything is broken. And when I wrote How They Broke Britain, I was very clear about finding the individuals responsible for creating the environment in which all the bad stuff can happen. But it's a work of patriotic duty to point out problems that are being inflicted upon a population by terrible members of the political or the media or the think tank class. And then you come to this week, where I haven't gone on holiday. I normally take this week off. I normally take half term off. It's very touching to see some of you expecting that I would do and getting in touch to express relief that I have not. But I quite want to be here for the budget, which is not a phrase I've ever said before in my life. I normally can't wait for budget days because I get to go home half an hour early. But there are two things going on this week in the context of the budget. There is this extraordinary sharpening of knives coming from precisely the people who inflicted Boris Johnson, Brexit, Liz Truss, Kwasi Kwarteng, Nadine Dorries, precisely the people that not only inflicted all of that upon us, but told us it was brilliant. They're sharpening their knives in the most extraordinary way. Keir Starmer's spectacles. It is, I've never known anything like it. But those of us who recognise the desperate state that the country is in, we've got a hell of a lot on the line as well. You just really, really, really want her to pull it off, right? You want to feel at least a sense of progress and a sense of improvement, the first step of which is recognising the mess that we're in, something that they all do now, except Rishi Sunak. And then you listen to the headline this morning, a very good headline about cuts and tax rises. Cuts and tax rises. And you think, well, the first thing you think is, what on earth can they cut? And you think, historically, you don't really get Labour politicians claiming that people on unemployment benefit are living a life of Riley. Most of them are close enough to reality to recognise that it's not a lifestyle choice for all but a negligible and deeply tragic minority. So I don't know where the cuts are going to come, but where are the tax rises going to come? So we have ended up in a country where everything that is essentially funded by the public purse is in a state of epic disarray. Would you disagree with that? Would you disagree with that? What would you point at and say that's going well? But in terms of things that are funded by the public purse. Nick, this morning doing an investigation into social housing, the problems in social housing. A lot of the maintenance, of course, has been farmed out into the private sector. A lot of the social housing companies are technically private sector or public-private partnerships, but we think of it as being something funded by the public purse, subsidised by the public purse. You look at what councils are doing on the ground, even things like clearing up leaves. Everything feels broken, right? And yet when the conversation moves to the necessity of raising some money to pay for the fixing of things, we are all outraged. We are all outraged. Or we are all adamant that it shouldn't be. Well, that's not strictly true. Quite a lot of people say, yes, I should pay a bit more tax. And then you say, how much? And they say, well, about 10 pence. So, you know, it's why these questions are unhelpful. A broad question about should you be paying more tax as someone who is a homeowner, as someone who earns over X amount a year, as someone who as someone who really understands the necessity of public improvement. Yes, I definitely should be paying. People like me should be paying more tax. How much more? 50p a year. People rarely want to offer up enough money to make a meaningful difference to their day-to-day existence. Don't ask me to define what a meaningful difference to your day-to-day existence is, but we've all got various different answers to that question. So I don't know how unique this is to the United Kingdom, but how have we ended up living in a country where everything is broken and nobody thinks that we should be paying to fix it? How can that be? I'm tempted just to read the phone number out and see what happens. Well, I don't have to read it out, of course. I know you'd hope I'd know it off by heart after all this time. 0345 60 60 973. What explanation would you give? I've got two thoughts on it. One of which is, well, they're probably both quite obvious to people kind enough to listen to this program. Let's see what's coming in by text already. Buy-to-let landlords, Luke says. What killed this country is buy-to-let landlords. It's very simple. You may have to explain it a little bit more than that, because it's certainly not immediately simple to me. Chris points out that people who got furlough and cash for heating are really angry about paying more tax. It is. That's a brilliant example of what is baffling. Thank you to Dave, who's already brought up foreign aid. Yeah, well done. The idea that the country's infrastructure, well, maybe that's part of the answer, actually. Dave accidentally making a half-decent point. If you persuade the population that the reason why hospitals, schools, prisons, roads, the army, the police, you persuade the population that it's all because of people who've come here, 30 or 40,000 people who've come here from overseas in a year, then governments can get away with doing what the last government did and cutting everything, cutting the money you receive and claiming that it's all a consequence of foreign aid or immigration. I guess listen, the right-wing vampires wouldn't put so much effort into peddling this nonsense if people like Dave weren't sucking it up on a daily basis. So, Idiot's Corner open early this morning. Thank you, Dave. But for the rest of us, why? How have we ended up in this? I've got two answers. I've got boomers and I've got the royal family. And by that, I don't mean that that's where all the money is necessarily. What I mean by that is that is the reason why we've got this dissonance at the heart of our economy, at the heart of our population. The first is the generation that are known as boomers, and I'll check the dates for you precisely in a moment, but you know roughly who we're talking about. That they find it very hard to believe that they have won. Generationally speaking, they received the better deal, the best deal that any generation that is going to be around for the next 3 or 4 is ever going to. They possibly received the best deal that any generation of British people will ever receive. The boomers. They can't quite believe it. Things are getting worse, but they don't think they should be paying to make things better because they look at their income and they think, no, why should I? So I don't want to describe anybody as selfish. Well, not yet. But that idea, I think, this is just me thinking out loud. How can we have reached a point? Because the agenda is set by that generation. The newspapers speak almost exclusively to that generation. They are the generation most likely to believe that all the problems have been caused by somebody coming here from Afghanistan, desperate for a job but not allowed to work, or whatever other, or single mothers. You know, that's the Daily Mail target. I don't know how big the constituency is anymore, but the narrative speaks to that, doesn't it? But because they don't understand or believe that they have probably been, they will probably be proved to be the luckiest generation in British history, in terms of what an ordinary person, someone not born into wealth or privilege, might realistically hope to achieve in terms of property ownership, in terms of job security, in terms of pension provision. The luckiest generation in the history of Britain are also the angriest. They are also the people most likely to be, because of the nature of our media, which is obviously a huge part of this analysis, furious with foreigners, or furious with single mothers, or furious with unemployed people. And that is the environment in which successive governments, not just Tory, so I think the sort of neoliberal analysis probably applies to New Labour as well, but nowhere near as much. New Labour was putting money into things that were for the benefit of everybody, like schools. David Cameron and subsequent Tory leaders were taking it out. But that generation honestly believes they've been dealt a doff hand. They've been given the dirty end of the stick, when in fact they've had the best end of the stick that we will ever see in British history. And please don't at me to tell me that you're not that well off after all. This is describing it's a generalisation about a generation. And the second bit is, if you really were to fix things, then wouldn't you have to start? And of course, you're right. A majority of boomers voted for Brexit as well, which was a direct consequence of what we've just described. A direct consequence of thinking that, everybody else was an enemy. Foreigners, Brussels, single mothers, unemployed people. Instead of sitting there and counting your lucky stars, counting your blessings that you've received the best deal that any British generation is ever going to receive, they have put enormous effort from probably from the late 70s onwards into persuading you that somehow you're victims. So you keep voting to break things, whether it's the social contract, membership of the European Union, or, if honest Bob Jenrick's dreams come true, membership of the European Convention of Human Rights. And the second bit is a little bit less obvious. The second bit for me is the royal family. So I think about redistribution of wealth. What do you really think a left-wing government should do? And everyone will shout communist without knowing what it means. Here's a lovely thing I saw at the weekend. We've got to look after our own. We've got to look after our own. Don't call me a racist. I just think we should be looking after our own. Okay, let's look after our own. You're a communist. Do you see how easy it is to do the manipulation that I describe? People say we've got to look after our own as a fig leaf for their foreigner hatred. So as soon as you say, okay, we're going to put up taxes to look after our own, they call you a communist. So it's a beautiful pincer movement, which protects only wealth and privilege. But as we talk about every day on this programme, the big challenge is to persuade people that aren't going to benefit from a bent system that they really, really want to keep a bent system, which is what the question is today. How have we ended up in a country where everything needs more investment but no one thinks they should be paying for it? 0345 6060 973. And the royal family is the other bit, because if you were to really work things out, if you were really to assemble an audit of where all the money is in this country, the idea, I don't think it's personal. It's not personal for me, at least, but Prince William made a nice documentary about homelessness, and you watch it, and I saw a clip of it, and he's really keen to solve homelessness, and you sort of think that's nice. Isn't that nice? And then you sort of think, well, hang on a minute, this is a bit mad, isn't it? I mean, how many people could actually make a meaningful difference to the homelessness situation by simply giving up some of their own wealth and property? I don't mean that naively. I don't mean that Marxistly. I don't mean all of the wealth and the property. But I mean, honestly, how stupid does a country have to have become to sit there thinking, oh, that's nice. That's nice. Bloke who will live in Buckingham Palace one day wants to solve homelessness. I don't think that makes me Citizen Smith, does it? Or a kind of eternal undergraduate. That's got to be part of the reason why we have become a country where everything is broken but nobody thinks they should pay for fixing it. Part of the reason has to be that you've got the heir to the throne talking about wanting to solve homelessness as he prepares. Well, he already lives in various castles and palaces. I don't know. So what's your answer to the question? I'll take whatever you've got on this. Seriously, how have we become, have we always been, why are we, there we are, got there in the end, why are we a country in which we pretty much all agree that everything is broken, everything is in dire need of improvement, but we also have been successfully persuaded that none of us should pay for it? 0345 6060 973.
James O'Brien on LBC.
3 minutes after 10 is the time. It's a strange one, right? It is just mad. But when you step back sometimes, you see it. I always talk about those magic eye pictures from the 80s and the 90s, which I never got the hang of. My brain didn't ever really compute them. But you stare at this sort of completely random collection of shapes, and if you get the perspective right, then you see a steam train coming out of it, or a tiger, or something like that. I sometimes feel that the news can be like that. And that leads us to questions like the one we're asking today, which is, how have we ended up living in a country where everyone thinks everything is broken, but nobody thinks that they should be paying to repair it? Gary's in Nashville, Tennessee, would you believe? Gary, what would you like to say? Are you going to sing your contribution?
You definitely don't want to hear that.
No, fair enough. Well, so what made you pick up the phone?
So every time I have this conversation with friends, the answer quickly comes around to, well, if we want to pay more, then that means the tax rate is always going to have to go up because things always get more expensive. And that makes sense. So
no, it doesn't make sense. Not as a percentage. If it's a percentage of your income and things and inflation is a constant, then the percentage can stay the same. It's only
exactly.
Yeah. So it's only when we find ourselves in periods of epic decline that it falls to government to raise the money for restoration and repair, and then future governments can bring tax rates down again, as they've done in the past.
Yeah, fair enough. So I guess so one of the things I think people don't realise, one of the things that they're paying for, and it's a big thing that's missing from the equation, and that's the percentage of the government's budget that is going towards private corporations that are providing for public services has increased dramatically over the last 20 years, and those profits have been taken out. So I think that's a big part of the equation that people don't.
Yeah, but it doesn't. I mean, it might be part of the explanation as to why the money that we pay in tax hasn't gone further, and it's a slightly more nuanced conversation than you allow. That tension between, if you let me make a profit, I will actually end up running everything so efficiently that the government gets, or the country gets, a good deal out of things. I've never quite bought that, but I can see the logic behind it. It doesn't really explain why people recognise that everything is broken but don't believe that it needs to fall to them to pay for it. Does it?
I think it's because they don't realise why it's broken. They don't realise what the problem is. So they quite rightly think, "Oh, it's not my fault. That's why I shouldn't pay for it."
Yeah, I mean, I think you'd struggle to sort of fiscally prove that the reason why everything is crumbling and everything on its knees is a consequence of private sector profit. And the key word being everything, when you've had 14 years of austerity, when successive Tory governments were cutting everything and taking money out of things so that they could give generous tax arrangements to precisely the generation that we started talking about. I mean, how many times have our conversations come down to the fact that they are appealing to their base? They're looking after their base. And if you are comfortable, then tax cuts should be at the back of the queue for consideration in a budget. But for the last 14 years, you've been at the front of the queue. Jamie's in Bracknell. Jamie, what do you reckon?
Hello, James. Pleasure to speak to you.
Likewise.
Yeah, it's well, from speaking to my dad, who's a boomer. I'm a millennial, and I'm really engaged in politics. Always keep my eye on it. But my dad's never has done. He just thinks that the government just looked after him, and they're going to look after him because he's had it so sweet, you know?
Yes.
And now I'm like looking at the future, and even he's saying like he don't understand what's gone on. But I said to him, you haven't been engaged in politics all these years, and you just let them get away with it.
So I mean, you're talking about austerity, I think, most obviously.
Yeah, austerity, and even just, you know, like he benefited from that Labour move, the Labour, like Clement Attlee building the social housing, the NHS. Yeah. And they seem to forget that
socialism.
It was the Labour that brought that in. Socialism that brought that in, yeah. And then they just lean to like the capitalist way and the right way of politics because they think that's looking after them, but they are. And
now that he looks around and presumably recognises that the country is in many ways in a worse state than it was previously, whose fault does he think it is? Why does he think it's
he said it's Thatcher's fault, yeah.
Thatcher, he'd take it back to Thatcher. Well, he'd have half a point, actually, wouldn't he? Or maybe more than half a point where it comes to... But no, it's worse than it was in 2010, let's say. That can't be Thatcher's fault.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. It's obviously successive governments after Thatcher as well, I think. You know, like, so she's obviously sold up all the houses and made everything, like, private. And,
so your dad's left-wing?
Yeah, 100%.
That's
he was but he just benefited so much from like the right, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, well, that really combination, you come off the bat, born between 46 and 64, I think is the technical bit, and you come off the back of the post-war settlement, and then you have the kind of benefits of deregulation and just luck, you know, geographical serendipity, but also, you know, the big privatization and all the money that was sloshing around. You feel you got a piece of it, then you feel that the jobs are good. And yet, when you look now at whether you should be paying to repair all the things that are broken, who would say, yeah, me? Who would put their hand up? And those of us who do sometimes a bit smugly say, I think I should be paying more tax. Then when you really dig into it, either you would balk at the figure that's needed, or you don't really mean it, or you do it on the proviso that everybody else does as well, which sometimes people struggle to understand. Oh, do you know, James, you can voluntarily write a cheque for the Inland Revenue tomorrow. Yeah, but that's not going to change anything. is it? That's the whole point about a society, about a social contract, about a taxation system. So we've ended up in a country where most of us accept that things are pretty rotten, and nobody accepts that the more tax you pay, the better things will get. How's that happened? Thomas Watts is here with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 33 minutes after 10. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Question why we have this simultaneous state of affairs. And you can go as deep as you want on this. I mean, I brought boomers and the royal family into it, but a few of you mentioning companies like Amazon on the texts as well. The what do you call it? The creation of an ecosystem. It's one of my favourite phrases, that, actually, because it's all very well banging on about people doing crazy things, but the question of how we ended up living in a place where crazy things can happen is 100 times more interesting. We may have a crack at that with reference to America later this programme and Donald Trump and this rally in Madison Square Garden, which is about as close to a fascist rally that you will ever see, until it is actually called a fascist rally by everybody. And the idea that, I don't know whether it's the turning up of the volume or the boiling of the frog or the I don't know what it is, but we may have a look at that later. A floating island of garbage, one of the speakers described Puerto Rico as. Talk of poisoning the blood of our nation. That's pure Hitler. And of course everyone goes, I can't believe you're comparing Trump and his supporters to Hitler. Murder in their genes. All of these things. There they are talking about Latino men in exactly the same way that Adolf Hitler would have talked about Jews, but people are going along with it. People are loving it. How do you create an ecosystem in which that kind of thing can happen? Is the only way you're ever going to be able to stop it from happening in the future. I'll give you an example in Britain. This is John. Will you be talking about the Labour MP Mike Amesbury being videoed attacking and punching someone in the street? If so-called far-right people have been given significant prison sentences for protesting against immigration or posting anti-government tweets, what sort of prison sentence should he get? In fact, why isn't he in prison already? So let's run through that, John, line by line, shall we? I am talking about it now. The whip has been suspended. Charges haven't been brought. So we could talk about it more, and we may, but I don't know what there is to say until we find out a little bit more about what has gone on. The reason why he's not in jail is because he hasn't been charged yet and he hasn't been convicted. The reason why the people you describe are in jail is because they pleaded guilty to the crimes that they were accused of. And guess what? None of those crimes involve protesting against immigration or posting anti-government tweets. So unless you're suggesting that the people that you are presumably feeling a kinship with, unless you're suggesting that they were too stupid to realise that they were pleading guilty to things they hadn't done, as opposed to you being too stupid to realise that you're describing things they hadn't done, then you can't really say so-called in front of the phrase far right. So they pleaded guilty, which is why the sentencing was quick, and they were not sent to prison for protesting against immigration or posting anti-government tweets. They were sent to prison for either inciting violence, up to and including setting fire to hotels with people inside them, or tweeting things that were criminal acts in and of themselves. And that's why they've gone to jail. So that's how the environment gets created, because people like John can lie to themselves about observable reality, things that the rest of us can see with our own eyes and hear with our own ears. But if your bigotry has bent you so much that you can't see what's in front of you, and to the point where you will publicly misrepresent it, even though it involves advertising your own ignorance on an extraordinary level, and go away angry and convinced that you're still in the right, that's what's interesting. How have we created an ecosystem in which that kind of thing can happen? And the other thing that is probably more relevant to Trump than the conversation we're having this hour is the idea that as someone who leans towards a fairer politics, I would somehow be less disgusted by a politician from the Labour Party punching a member of the public than I would be a politician from the Conservative Party. It's the worst kind of projection. It's the weirdest thing. You know, imagine if, I don't know, it turned out that Kamala Harris was an adjudicated rapist. You think I'd be excusing that? You think I'd be sitting here saying, oh, Kamala Harris, Donald Trump, come on. That's the mad thing, is that when you find yourself cheerleading for racists, far-right fascists, rapists, multiple felons, you find yourself cheerleading for them, you have to convince yourself that the people opposed to them would also be cheerleading for criminals if the boot was on the other foot. It's just not true. But it speaks again to that question of how you create an ecosystem in which the really, really mad stuff can happen. So we will turn our attention to that story when more details emerge. For example, something I didn't know until this morning, involving a man being ordered to stay away from the MP, Mike Amesbury, after he was found guilty of stalking and harassing. So, for example, that might have something to do with the story. But until we know, it would be irresponsible to wade in there, except to say, don't punch people. Don't punch people. And don't throw milkshakes at them either. 10:38 is the time. Jade's in Gatwick. Jade, what would you like to say?
I would like to say that I'm one of those people that complain about the fact that we're being taxed, etc., because I have no faith in the fact that it will go into the things that will benefit from increase in tax. I have not seen any evidence in the last 14, 15 years of all the things that you hear about in the news that come up, on a very regular basis. I'm not seeing any of those things improving, but our taxes are continuing to go up. The government is still in the news, for getting donations, etc. They're still sitting pretty, whilst we're not.
So you don't distinguish between different governments. You don't. See the.
No.
Good
no,
Lord.
I don't.
Okay, well that's going to be a key part of the answer to the question that we're asking for some people, isn't it?
Yeah, I just think that they're all exactly the same. They all go to the same school. They all know the right things to say. They all know how to get where they want to get to, but they don't know how to get.
There was. I don't want to sound patronising, Jade. This is said in fun, but there was a general election this year.
Yes.
And the new lot have got more state educated people in the cabinet than at any point pretty much since the Second World War.
Right, but I've got beef with them at the moment.
No, that's fine. But what you said was they all go to the same schools.
No, I meant that they all get the same government, politician training, not necessarily the schools, of
right.
That we all go to. I just mean that they all get the same media training. I mean from that perspective. But no, I've got and like the current government has got it in for people who send their children to private schools. That's the next thing, and not realising the impact that they're going to have on normal working people who have chosen to send children, that is the most appropriate place for them to go to, that they are doing everything they can to make ends meet to ensure that their child has their needs met.
Yeah.
And yet they're just throwing a policy out there.
Which they have already said would help go towards provide more SEN teachers for the entire state school system.
But they need to make... Yeah, but
they've said that. And let's not just gloss over it.
No, I agree. But that's what they've said. However, there are, even just in my local infant school, there are so many children who are still waiting for EHCP plans now. So they need... Yeah, but
that's a consequence of... That's a consequence of the cuts that have happened previously, that the budget this week will be designed to fix. So, you're wrong to say that taxes have gone up a lot over the last 14 years for everybody. Some people are paying less tax. I'm paying less tax than I would have been at some points previous to today, and I'm relatively speaking very well off. I can, for example, I could afford to send my children to private school. So when they announce that they're going to tax people like me more to help people like you, why would you be dismissive of that?
Because I'm not seeing any evidence of any of the tax.
But what evidence are you? This is why I made that slightly cheeky comment about the general election. This is a new government promising to fix things that have been done by previous governments, which you're upset about.
So did the previous government. And
no, they didn't. They never said they were going. They never said they were going to. Well, Boris Johnson might have said he was going to build 40 hospitals, but exactly. They certainly never said that they were going to try and improve the life of the majority by coming for a little bit more tax from the minority. It's the polar opposite of what they stood for. Yeah, so let me ask you this, and forgive me if it's not. You don't have to answer it. If you had to point at something, so you see somebody because I keep getting told that Keir Starmer is a communist. What I'm reading is that Angela Rayner is going to steal everybody's money, that these are really left-wing people. I don't personally think they are, but the idea that they're the same as the Tories is to me, forgive me, that's absolutely ridiculous. So where do you think you get that first inkling of the idea that the government that all of the right-wing media is absolutely terrified of is going to be exactly the same as the governments that all of the right-wing media was cheerleading for, up to and including Liz Truss bringing in the worst fiscal event in the history of these islands. Where do you think you got the idea that they're the same?
I think it all comes from fear, to be honest.
Fear of
that are we going to continue going in the same direction?
But that can't be right, because if this budget this week is going to announce a change of direction, but that's not what you want, because
no. But who is that going to penalise, and who is that going to benefit?
Well, who do you think it should penalise? Or rather, if I don't like the language of penalty, who do you think should be paying a little bit more to improve things for everybody?
I think the government. I think those people.
Well, the government can only spend money they raise through taxes, Jade.
No, I mean their own personal pockets.
So you think Keir Starmer should be paying for special educational needs provision in British schools with his income, his salary as a Prime Minister?
I think they have so much money.
Lord.
Look at,
okay.
I mean, it's not... Okay, all right, it's not... like I said...
He didn't send his children to private school.
No, but he went to private school.
No, he didn't.
He did?
No, he didn't. He went to a grammar school that became fee-paying while he was there, but the children who were already in the school their parents were not required to pay fees, which his parents certainly wouldn't have been able to afford anyway, which is part, perhaps, of why you've ended up thinking that they're all the same, because you've somehow ended up believing something categorically untrue.
Yeah, possibly.
So whose fault do you think that might be? Not yours. I'm not for a minute suggesting it's yours, by the way, just for clarity.
I think that there are so many things.
No, don't move on. Where do you think you got the idea that Keir Starmer should be paying from his own salary because he's so rich for, I don't know, fixing potholes or more special educational needs teachers, and he went to private school, which a minute ago you were defending people who send their children to private school, but when you thought Keir Starmer had gone there, you were using it as something to attack him with.
He's penalising people who have chosen to go to private school by adding that.
Yeah.
And not really very well thinking out what the implications of that are. He's going to be adding...
What percentage of the population do you think send their children to private school?
I've got no idea.
Take a guess.
I don't know, like 30, 40%.
Okay. It's 7.
Right.
It's 10:45.
James O'Brien on LBC.
10:49 is the time. I wonder whether the second caller, who described his dad as being kind of just a bit detached from everything, a bit disengaged from everything, I wonder whether his dad would agree. Because I wonder how much of the answer to the question of how we have become a country where everybody recognises that everything is broken, but nobody thinks that they should be paying for it. I wonder whether the answer to that is in large part, and it's a bit hard to do it on this programme because most people listening will not fall into this category, but because so many people don't know anything, or they've been so effectively misinformed about things. I was struck on Friday by how identical, I was only struck afterwards, by how identical the conversation about landlords was to the conversation about private education, which Jade just referred to then. That the idea that our media has put so much effort into defending the 7% of the population who can afford to send their children to private school, and there is news in that field, by the way. The number of private schools has gone up since that policy was announced, not gone down. Some have closed, more have opened. And the defence of people who can afford to be landlords. Truly extraordinary when you look at the state of this country. And you think about how much of the political narrative, and Jade, I think it's fair to say, and I don't want to focus on her unduly, but Jade was quite a good example of this. You look at all the problems facing the country in the context of a conversation about tax, and you're asking me to feel aggrieved for people who are either in the 7% of the population that can send their children to private school, that do send their children to private school, or the 4% of the population who could be described as landlords. So you want a government that's looking after the 94, the 95, the 96% of the population, don't you? And it's not looking to abolish private schools or indeed abolish being a landlord. It's just saying these are areas where we could probably raise a few quid. But no. Apparently not. Adrian's in Henley. Adrian, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello.
I've got a few figures that I think back up your
Fears.
your points.
Yes.
I got I saw on LinkedIn, do you know the tax campaigner Dan Needle?
Of course.
Dan Neidle?
Yes, I do indeed. He's a force for good, I think, isn't he?
Yes, I think so. And he publicised a survey done recently which asked the public what are the 3 top things the government spends money on.
Oh, Lord.
Excuse me, excluding interest, the top 3 were correctly the NHS. The second was spending on migrants and asylum seekers.
Right.
And the third was spending on expenses for MPs. The actual figures, which Dan pointed out, on spending on asylum seekers and migrants...
That wouldn't be in the top 10, would it?
No, nowhere near. It's 0.3% of spending,
Yeah.
whereas the...
I saw this.
Yeah, it's 0.1.
And the one that is probably most relevant to my boomer analysis would probably be pensions, wouldn't it? Which is the second highest expenditure for the Treasury. So, and yet the number of people who would queue up to advertise the fact that they believe the opposite is growing all the time. What do you think this is relevant to? This answers the question of what, because a bit like Jade, perhaps. They think that the money is going on things that they don't feel it should be going on, or that it's... I mean, MP's expenses got on that list as well, didn't it, on Dan Need, on the research that Dan published. MP's expenses. The idea that was the fourth biggest expenditure for the Treasury was MP's expenses. These people believe.
Yeah, so I think it's unsurprising if people are convinced that their money is going in ways that they may not want it to be going, they're very reluctant to pay any more.
And that is, it's a good job you didn't ring in at 10:05, isn't it? Because I think this is chapter and verse. This is the subject, in a way, completely closed down.
Well, yeah, I think it's pretty eye-watering, those responses. And I think also you have to consider that it's quite a bad comment on successive governments that they allow people to be in such ignorance. You never hear people the government representatives kicking back when they hear about these surveys and saying this is ridiculous, or indeed presenting where the money does go. Most of it, I mean, if I'd have taken part in that survey, I'd have done a lot better than the majority did.
Would
but
you?
I wouldn't have. Yeah, I would have done. But I knew that asylum and MP's expenses wouldn't get anywhere. But equally, how many of us do know where the money goes? It would be a lot better if we did, and I think...
How would you do that? How would you do that? Because, I mean, it is extraordinary, and I'll tweet it, actually, for people who want to have a look at it themselves. So the public believe that the top 3 things on which you believe that the government spends the most money, and when they collate it, top is the NHS, second is migrants and asylum seekers, third is interest on government debt, fourth is expenses, fifth is overseas aid, sixth is benefits for people of working age who can't find a job, seventh is benefits for people of working age who've been signed off sick. Then you get the pensions, and then you get greener energy, moving to green. And the reality is, health is top, pensions is second, local government is third, social security is fourth, education is fifth, debt interest is sixth, defence is seventh, transport is eighth. What's DESNZ?
I haven't got that far down the list.
No, well, anyway, and then overseas aids come in at 9th, childcare at 10th. Asylum and MP expenses not even in the top 10. So if we answer that question, if you ask how have people ended up thinking, agreeing that everything is broken and also agreeing that they shouldn't be paying for any of the efforts to improve things, these graphs here, although they're not infallible, they're going to provide a more powerful answer than almost anybody else.
Yes, I think so.
Why do you blame the government? Because you've heard callers on this programme who would be very much part of this problem, very much part of what you're describing, this process, and they have gleaned their opinions from radio presenters or newspapers.
Well, I don't only blame the government. Obviously, there's a massive lobby to try and convince people that that's where their money does
Why?
go. But the government...
Why?
Well, I've listened to your programme for a long time now, James, and I think you explain that on a regular basis.
Well, I try to, but again, is it really that simple that people who have got more than all of us and still aren't satisfied are trying to persuade the rest of us that they're coming after what we've got in order to make sure that no one ever comes after what they've got. It's Rupert Murdoch's biscuits all over again. Thank you, Adrian. I shall send that research out imminently. But first, let's talk to Adam, who's in Ealing. Adam, what made you pick? I think DESNZ is the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero.
Yeah.
So down with that sort of thing. What made you pick up the phone, Adam?
Yeah, I think the answer to your question, James, is where how did we get to where we are now and why we don't want to fix it? It's simple. We're in a cost of living crisis. And, ask yourself one question. If you've been paying taxes all your life and you see, you leave that in the hands of the government, we've done what we've had to do. We've been doing what we've had to do. We've been paying our taxes. And where's that gotten us?
Well, let's run through it, shall we? We've got the health service, which is it's still fit for purpose, albeit that it's in pretty bad shape. You're expecting a pension when you get to retirement age, when you stop earning money yourself. You know what local government does in terms of making sure the lights are on and making sure you can drive down roads and make it okay. Social security, should you need it. That's there as well.
Okay, but that still doesn't answer.
There's not a child in the country who can't go to school. So we've got we've got education.
That makes I hear where you're
we've got an army.
I hear where you're coming from.
And then you've got the roads that I just referred to the council's keeping open. The fact that they exist in the first place is going to be down
the point you're making.
Down to the Department of so possibly the problem you're highlighting unintentionally is the fact that we don't realise where our money is going because we're constantly listening to people who tell us that it's all going on migrants and MPs' expenses.
It's two things, James. It's two things. It's poor money management, firstly, and secondly.
But we just listed all the things that you get, and you started off by telling me that you don't get anything. So you can't now segue effortlessly to poor money management.
No, I didn't say you don't get anything. I never said you don't get anything.
You kind of did.
I said, where is the money going?
And I told you, but it was a rhetorical question, wasn't it?
But then we still have a black hole of money that, it's obviously been poorly managed because we still have a black hole of money.
But what if it hasn't been poorly managed? What if the black hole, or what if it has been poorly managed, but the black hole exists because of the things that we've actually been talking about? Because people have been politicians have been trying to cut taxes and cut services.
Okay, but you've asked, you're going away from your question. Now, your initial question is why we don't want to do anything to fix it.
No, I know the answer to that. I know the answer you're providing to that, which is that you don't think that...
There's another thing. There's another element to it as well. And it's the element of, Jade was saying how, the government should fork out more money. No, I don't think they can, especially they're not going to pay from their own pocket. That's ridiculous. But what I think
we can all agree, and I'm sure in retrospect Jade would probably agree as well. That was a fairly ridiculous... But what it highlighted was how much trouble you get into when you start trying to offer up an alternative to the system that we've got.
No. But there are alternatives. Look at Norway, for example. Norway invests
much higher taxes.
In this country, but invest the money to generate more money.
Much higher taxes.
Why is the government not generating money by other means?
Well, Norway's sovereign wealth fund is built on oil. We haven't got any left.
But if we have a system in place where we can generate money by other means.
What means?
By not relying on just the taxes we get from the people.
Yeah, what means?
But for example, nationalising on some trades. For example,
he's doing that.
Fuel that comes.
He's doing that. He set up Great British Energy.
But
to create jobs and ideally revenues as well.
I'm talking about the import of it. For example, if the government can generate money by other means,
you can't keep saying generate money by other means. You need to tell me what the means are, man.
So. For example, the fuel that is imported into the country, the oil that's imported into the country by these big companies, BP, Shell, etc.
So tax increases on that.
Tax increases or
so one way to avoid tax increases by generating money from other means is to have tax increases, is what you just said. That is.
By nationalising on 30% of that trade. So
what do you mean nationalising 30% of that trade?
So, for example...
you mean just go and take it? Just go and say that belongs to us now? That's Al Capone territory, mate.
But at the end of the day,
there is no other answer to the question of where is the government going to get the money from, and your answer is as ridiculous as Jade's.
I just feel like the people have been paying taxes for such a long time now.
And what did the Romans ever do for you?
And what is
the problem is that they've nibbled and cut, and they've given all of these bonuses and benefits to boomers, which means that the rest of us are watching a decline in a system and thinking that it's somehow evidence that what we pay doesn't get us what we deserve, when actually the opposite is true. You need to pay more to get what you deserve. And you use Norway as an example and then gloss casually over the fact not only have they got a immeasurably fairer distribution of wealth, the gap between the highest paid person in a company or a country and the lowest paid is a fraction of what it is here. But guess what? The person at the top is still at the top. It's not like some sort of communist dream where they all get paid the same, whether they're running the company or mopping the floors. And taxes are much higher there. So you kind of answered your own question when you thought that you were doing the opposite. I know that sounds a bit unkind, but, you know, we're all listening to the same show.
James O'Brien on LBC.
5 minutes after 11 is the time. Do you think that, I don't know how long you've listened to this programme or how closely you follow things, including, I mentioned to you last week, I don't like being called a viral sensation. It makes me sound like flu. But I think we might be reaching the part of the year where I start wearing my scarf in the studio. Do you remember that I do that every year? Because just when I start feeling that little tickle, I know what you're thinking if you just tuned in. What is this nonsense and why am I listening to it? But I think this is a polite way of asking someone to go and get me my scarf. It's all right. I'll wait until tomorrow. You've got better things. It's well below your pay grade. Speaking of pay grades, it was the owner of the Washington Post, or possibly his representative on Earth, a British journalist called Will Lewis, who issued an edict this weekend that the Washington Post would not endorse a candidate in the presidential election, and it shook many journalists and consumers of decent journalism to their core. Because the worst fears about Donald Trump, and I always remember the article that Andrew Neil published when he still ran the Spectator magazine, Donald Trump won't be as bad as you think. And you sort of think, how do people like that stay in public life? But there we are. Trump is now every bit as bad. I mean, I can't help seeing some parallels between American politics and the situation in the Middle East, where we began our conversations about Israel's response to the October the 7th terror attack by being constantly reassured that none of the things that were happening now would happen. Do you remember that? I mean, not just in terms of the death toll, but in terms of what is being targeted. Move to a safe space and then you won't get hurt. Oh, what's that? You've just attacked the safe space. So you never do these things overnight. I'm fascinated by that. I keep using the analogy of boiling a frog, which is probably a bit inadequate. But the idea that if I announced today that I'm going to do X, what I shall do I know not, but they shall be the terror of the earth. If I went full King Lear on you, I'm going to do the terror. If I announced it today, you'd never put up with it. But if I slowly introduced it, or if I let it seep in, if you suspected that I might, and then when I get to the terror of the earth, you're like, yeah, okay, that's fine. Yeah, and also, why aren't you talking about Mike Amesbury today, who punched a member of the public the other night? Do you see what I mean? It never, ever, ever could happen overnight. And I don't know enough about what newspapers were doing in 1930s Germany. I really don't. I presume that some of them were pro-Hitler. Some of them thought that he was silly and would go away. Some of them both sided him. Journalists I quite like historically, sort of telling me, oh, it's a tough choice because Kamala Harris isn't all that either, is she? And I'm like, but this is, and how clear does it have to be? The front page. So I mentioned the Washington Post because when you've got people like Woodward and Bernstein coming out and saying, or Bob Woodward coming out and saying, this is serious. You've got people resigning in their droves because the threat that Trump poses now is inarguably fascistic. So the luxury we had last time round, or the first time round, of having conversations about, I remember asking on Newsnight actually, some really hallowed American academic, I said, has there ever been a politician who used fascist language to campaign and then wasn't actually that fascistic when they actually got into power? And the only answer that the sort of mass brains present could come up with was a chap whose name I've forgotten, but he became the Chancellor of Austria, I think in the 1920s, and is widely regarded as one of Adolf Hitler's inspirations. So the best they could come up with in answer to the question of someone who was even more fascistic campaigning than they turned out to be in power was a bloke who ended up being an inspiration for Adolf Hitler. And I think and this is one of the things that I want you to talk to me about. I think that liberals, and by which I mean simply people who don't think you should be punished for the colour of your skin or the contents of your passport, people who aren't fascists or people who have no fascist sympathies, I think we're frightened of talking about some of this stuff because we're frightened of it being true. And weirdly, the more you begin to worry that it's true, the more frightened you become of talking about it, as if you can sort of keep it. Maybe I'm only talking about myself here, because I'm surprised. I was thinking about it at the weekend. I'm surprised at how little coverage we've given to the American election. But we had that lovely guest last week, didn't we, who's written a great book and has covered American politics for half a decade. And he was saying something similar. The American media doesn't know what to do. The New York Times' Ray Suarez was our guest on Friday. It's worth looking him up. It's a great book as well. The one paper that got it right at the weekend was the New York Times, when it wrote, Donald Trump says he will prosecute his enemies, order mass deportations, use soldiers against citizens, abandon allies, and play politics with disasters. Believe him. And that's why, I hadn't realised at the time, it must have happened subconsciously, that's why I just made the point about people who campaign in fascism but govern in democracy. It doesn't happen. That's why they've written "believe him" at the bottom of the page. That's why so many people are terrified that the Washington Post, owned by the second richest man in the world. So Trump's got the richest man in the world and the second richest man in the world shilling for him now. That's extraordinary. Given that he has said he will prosecute his enemies, order mass deportations, use soldiers against citizens, abandon his allies, and play politics with disasters. He said it all out loud. His supporters have gone even further. There was a rally in Madison Square Garden this morning that might as well have been in Nuremberg. And it's happening now. It's happening in plain sight. And yet still there will be, oh yes, all my enemies are Hitler. I mean, there's the list. He will prosecute his enemies. He's already lied about a democratic result. He will lie again. He will order mass deportations in the hope of pleasing the mob. He will use soldiers against citizens. He will abandon allies. He'll do whatever Vladimir Putin wants him to do. And the proof of that is in the pudding. It is happening. and the fear of talking about it, because it's almost as well. I mean, that's a human condition, right? Don't talk about it. Don't mention the war. You don't talk about it because it makes it more real. I'm not British. I beg your pardon. I'm not American, so I don't have skin in the game immediately. But my goodness me, it's a little bit close to home, isn't it? And of course, you've got British politicians who have said that they want him to win. I think Johnson has said he wants him to win. I know that Truss has said she wants him to win. I think Jenrick has said that he wants Trump to win. Trump is an adjudicated rapist. He's been convicted of 34 felonies. He has said things in public, on stage, even if you leave the mental decline out of the analysis and focus entirely. And the best case scenario is that the fascism is a consequence of the mental decline and he doesn't really mean it. But the stuff that is coming out now doesn't even brook debate. I guess. And even the question, I mean, what question would you ask if you were me now? Given that you've just heard my analysis of the facts. Because the question that's bubbling up in the back of my mind is this it now? If he wins, do our studies of fascism and fascist leaders cease to be confined to far corners of the globe and history books? This is how it happens. This is what is happening. But even there, if I say, is this it? I'm leaving the door open to the possibility that, I'm leaving the invitation on the table for you to ignore the evidence of your eyes and ears. The bit that amazes me most is the breakdown, is the 50-50. That's the bit I don't get. Because I guess the first time round, and even perhaps the second time round until he started lying, you could understand how people could turn a blind eye to the ugly stuff. He hadn't gone anywhere near as far as he's gone this time. You could. I know the Muslim ban was hideous, but I think people didn't really believe it. I think they just thought that it was campaigning. I don't think you can do that anymore. is this it? Is this what it feels like? Who knows? Who can even answer that question? Who was around the last time it happened in an English-speaking country? Has it ever happened in an English-speaking country? I'm not sure it has it? Demonstrating my historical ignorance. I'm going to come back from the break profoundly embarrassed. But this is how it happens. Let me give you some examples. So I've got all the clips of Trump. Let's listen to John Kelly first, who's the longest-serving White House chief of staff. This is really important. This is an interview he gave to the New York Times, which has got an awful lot wrong in recent months and years, but is arguably belatedly it's getting this right. So this is John Kelly, the longest-serving chief of staff in a Donald Trump White House.
What do you think? Do you think he's a fascist?
Well, I'm looking at the definition of fascism. It's a far-right, authoritarian, ultranationalist political ideology and movement characterized by a dictatorial leader, centralized autocracy, militarism, forcible suppression of opposition, belief in a natural social hierarchy. So certainly, in my experience, those are the kind of things that he thinks would work better in terms of running America. Again, back to this issue of, democracy is complicated, messy to operate, probably the worst kind of government there is, except for all the other ones. I think Churchill once said that. And again, our Constitution, our founders built in to the Constitution and to the way our government operates, built in a lot of checks and balances, and didn't design the government to be streamlined and whatnot. So, but certainly the former president is in the far right area. He's certainly an authoritarian. Admires people who are dictators. He has said that. So he certainly falls into the general definition of fascist, for sure.
So, I mean, there'll be stuff that people are desperately clinging to in the hope of discrediting Donald Trump's longest-serving chief of staff, who describes Donald Trump as a fascist. But I don't know that. I don't know that that's relevant anymore. I'll tell you what Pete in Manchester has pointed out. I made a terrible mistake earlier because, of course, most people accept that Vladimir Putin is the richest man in the world. So Trump actually has the three richest men in the world cheerleading for him or backing him, now that the Washington Post has abnegated any semblance of democratic responsibility by refusing to endorse a candidate, by effectively saying, Jeff Bezos effectively saying, yeah, we could live with the fascism. Elon Musk saying, we could live with the fascism. And that's where you end up feeling naive, isn't it? You think, because of course, for fascism to happen, really powerful and influential people have to say to themselves, yeah, I could live with the fascism. I could live with the Nazism. I'd be okay. In fact, I'd probably do quite well out of it. I always worry and obsess about ordinary people. I sit there thinking, God, when I was watching Star Wars, were half the audience rooting for Darth Vader? Were half the audience actually hoping that Commodus would come out on top, where Maximus was in the arena in Gladiator? Is it? I mean, the fascist dictator half the population likes the fascist dictator. Always worrying about ordinary people. How can half the population be like this? Still don't get it. But of course, a large part of the answer is the people at the very top. So the owner of the Washington Post, the owner of Twitter, the owner of Russia, they want Trump in power because they think he'll be better for business. It's not a million miles away from the conversation we were having in the first hour about taxes. And after the break, I'll show you some of the stuff that went on at the Madison Square Garden rally this weekend, just in case you think I'm exaggerating.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 21 minutes after 11, and I don't know what the question is, and I make no apology for that, because we're dealing with such remarkable territory. We're dealing with such remarkable material. All right, so here are some examples of the people that were speaking up for Donald Trump at a rally in Madison Square Garden this weekend. Let's start with a radio host, because, you always want to listen to them, called Sid Rosenberg.
She is some sick that Hillary Clinton, huh? What a sick son of a The whole party, a bunch of degenerates, lowlives, Jew haters and lowlives. Every one of them. Every one of them.
So, that's pretty close to incitement. Every single person on the other side of the political divide is a degenerate. I think that's a word the Nazis used quite a lot. And, he's getting cheered. I mean, how much of this was predicted by Trump's people or cleared in advance with Trump's people, I don't know. But here's a comedian called Tony Hinchcliffe.
A lot going on. I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico. Okay. All right. Okay. We're getting there. Again, normally I don't follow the national anthem, everybody.
One of Donald Trump's childhood friends described Kamala Harris as the Antichrist. This is an internet celebrity called Grant Cardone. This is well worth listening to as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, Kamala Harris is the least qualified candidate to ever run for any political office in American history. She makes her boss look competent. She's a fake. I'm not here to invalidate her. She's a fake, a fraud. She's a pretender. Her and her pimp handlers will destroy our country. They will. They've already crippled the dollar, manufactured inflation, imported a virus, censored your voices, funded transgender surgeries, and made empty promises to the middle class for 50 years. This election has to be more than a victory. It needs to be a landslide. We need to slaughter this other people.
We need to slaughter this other people. If you're wondering what the reference to trans children is about, then this is Trump himself at an earlier appearance, revisiting what has become one of his greatest hits.
Can you imagine you're a parent and your son leaves the house and you say, Jimmy, I love you so much. Go have a good day in school. And your son comes back with a brutal operation. Can you even imagine this? What the hell is wrong with our country?
And that's the other bit about fascism that I think non-fascists find hard to understand, is the constant attacks upon your own country. Not upon things that can be visibly fixed, but either on completely made-up things like that. There's absolutely no evidence or example, or he presses... I mean, he's talking absolute gibberish in the hope of terrifying people. But describing things in that way as well. It's horrible. And on it goes. Here is Rudy Giuliani, the guy who booked the press conference most famously at a garden centre, thinking it was a Four Seasons hotel, talking about Palestinian people.
Hamas is not there for us. Iran is not there for us. They want to kill us. And the Palestinians are taught to kill us at 2 years old. They won't let a Palestinian in Jordan. They won't let a Palestinian in Egypt. And Harris wants to bring them to you. They may have good people. I'm sorry, I don't take a risk with people that are taught to kill Americans at 2. I'm on the side of Israel. You're on the side of Israel. Donald Trump's on the side of Israel. And they're on the side of the terrorists.
And then, of course, the growing movement in America poised to vote against Kamala Harris because of her involvement and support for the Israeli campaigns in Gaza and latterly Lebanon. So utterly detached from reality and the truth. Kamala Harris, whether she's got it right or wrong is a debate for another day, but she is getting attacked for doing the polar opposite of what she's actually done. It's extraordinary, and it's fascistic. Giuliani, I mean, to have him back in the fold, that's the key question in many ways. After trying to steal an election, forget the adjudicated rape. I don't mean that as in make light of it. Forget the 34 felonies. The incontrovertible evidence of him trying to steal an election, the tape recordings of him talking to people about what the crimes he wanted them to commit. Now, these are cases that aren't going to reach court until after the election. And, of course, if he wins, all bets are off. But it's all there. It's all there. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I think it's not a question anymore, is it? Are people in denial about this? Do people not know this? It's a great liberal failure whenever fascism rises, is to imagine that there is some sort of gazumping, bamboozling going on. They love it. In fact, you would never have had a fascist government in the history of humanity if a population didn't want it. Enough of a population wanted it. It doesn't even have to be half. So he lied. He tried to steal an election and he then lied about it. It is the most fundamental assault upon democracy that's imaginable. And a key factor in it, one of the key figures in it, who's been disbarred as a lawyer, he's faced, was Rudy Giuliani, who's back in the game.
Now, I don't know. I'm not going to do conspiracy, and I'm not going to do conspiracy. But it's kind of funny that they tried everything else, and now they're trying to kill him. They better not. Try again.
So, I mean, it is just bonkers. And then over the course of the same weekend, the Washington Post and the Los Angeles Times endured tranches of resignations from staffers because they ended a history of endorsing presidential candidates. They're getting ready for fascist America. They are getting ready for fascist America. So it's coming up to 11:28. I still don't know what question to ask you, because I want to ask you a question that allows the possibility that I'm wrong. That allows the possibility that everything I've just said is somehow challengeable or refutable. I mean, there's text coming in saying, I can't wait until he wins. You'll be crying all your liberal tears. But you're not denying that what I'm saying is true. You're kind of so close now to saying, yeah, I love it. I'm a fascist and I love it. And I think that must be what happens next. Well, I mean, how do pogroms happen? How do Holocausts happen? How do neighbours end up grassing on their Jewish neighbours? Unless they love it. I want deportations. I'm going to grass up people I think are illegal immigrants. I'm going to grass up people I think deserve to be prosecuted because they opposed Donald Trump when he was lying and trying to steal elections. We're just there, aren't we? We're right on the precipice of watching a fascist regime move into the White House. And if you thought it was bad last time, you ain't seen nothing yet. They're telling us what they're going to do. And we're still sitting there going, oh no, it's just, rhetoric. It's just campaign hyperbole. And anyway, Kamala Harris isn't perfect, It's extraordinary. It's why this New York Times front page stopped me in my tracks, particularly when you see it in relief to what the Washington Post and the Los Angeles Times have done. Donald Trump says he will prosecute his enemies. And remember, his enemies are people who tried to uphold the law of America, who tried to defend the US Constitution. He will prosecute his enemies. He will order mass deportations. He will use soldiers against citizens. He will abandon allies. First people to suffer under a Trump presidency will be the Ukrainians. And he will play politics with disasters, which is, worse than turning up at flooding and just throwing paper towels at people. Extraordinary. And you've got Musk and Jeff Bezos, certainly in the former case, not just up for it, but mad for it. He's on the stage. He's turning up on the stage. He bought Twitter because he said he wanted it to become a fairer and more balanced place. And he's using it hundreds of millions of dollars worth of free publicity to get Trump into the White House. Vladimir Putin sitting there rubbing his hands. This is it now. Like, the only glimmer of optimism comes from the fact that the numbers in this country of people who want Trump to be president are still very small. A proportion of people attracted to Nigel Farage's brand of politics are a bit of an outlier on this. They quite like the idea of a fascist leader in America. What would admirers of Nigel Farage possibly find to admire in the prospect of a fascist leader taking over in United States? You'd need to look at that yourself. He said you will never need to vote again. You know that he said that. Project 2025 has literally described what they are planning to do. And they are still sitting there and claiming that what we saw on January the 6th didn't happen, or that the people trying to kill, the people baying for his own vice president's blood were the bad guys. The good guys were the rioters. He's promising pardons, describing them as martyrs. And So I think I'm going to ask you how this happens. I'm not going to ask you, is it happening? Because it's happened now. How does this happen? How naive am I? Thinking that at some point in the course of the last year, it would all blow up and everyone would go, oh my God, he's an actual Nazi. So the bit that we never say, the bit that we never do out loud, is the bit where the supporters admit the truth. Do they admit it next? Is that the next stage? He gets into the White House, the fascism starts in earnest, and they cheer it. Do they still deny that they're supporting fascism? Even as enemies are prosecuted for the, quotes, crime, end quotes, of upholding the law. How did this happen? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. How did this happen? How is this happening when so many of us find it so incomprehensible? And as with almost all of our conversations, there must be a million different answers to this. So I'll take whatever you've got. How is this happening? But what I won't take is people denying the evidence of their own eyes and ears. Because, listen, I know that Trump supporters exist, and we both know that you're a fascist. So I know how it happens in the context of enough of you lot end up getting your man into power. But how is fascism going to happen is a question that only the rest of us can answer. It's 11:32. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Here's Thomas Watts with the headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
11:36 is the time. Shelley Ann says, I don't think you'll get an answer to this one, James. It's utterly terrifying and mind-boggling. Whereas Jonathan comes close in Ashington to, this might just be it. I'll tell you why calling him a fascist has been so ineffectual, James. It's because his supporters just think yes, and. So I waste my time looking at professional supporters of Donald Trump's fascism and thinking, well, what, and they spend their lives desperately trying to pretend that he's not a fascist or that what he is saying and what he is doing does not fit the description of fascism. I don't know why. That's between them and their confessor. But for ordinary people, he says, I'm going to deport loads of people. They go, yeah, we love that. You're going to prosecute people for the crime of trying to uphold the law. Yeah, I love that. If he can unleash a mob to go after the blood of his own vice president, we all sit here going, rubbing our hands and stroking our beards and going, well, how could this be? The short answer is because people love it. I don't even know if it's right to talk about them of having been conned or manipulated or misled. Their people must just love it. And what civilization does is keep a lid on it. It acknowledges the existence of this poison and keeps a lid on it. Because when someone like Trump comes along, if they can get the lid off, this is what happens. Al's in Glasgow. Al, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi. I think I would encourage people to watch a series that's about 40 years ago, called The World at War. It's narrated by Laurence Olivier. 17 episodes, I think, and it covers the rise of fascism right through World War II, and it covers it factually using newsreel footage. I think if people watch that, they would see a lot of parallel with today.
But with the people that we're trying to analyse now, they wouldn't stop. Because people were watching it then. I think it's 26 episodes, actually, to give it its full credit. People were watching it then and loving it. That's what we're trying to get into today.
Yeah.
You've seen the rallies. That people are hysterical with joy for Adolf Hitler, just as they're hysterical with joy for Donald Trump.
Yeah, I think they like to get conned, but they're very willing to get conned.
I don't think they are being conned. I don't think they're being conned, Al. This is where I am today. I could go back again, but I think the reason why I've not been frightened of talking about it, I've been reluctant to talk about it, although I've made up for that with one of the longest uninterrupted spiels that the programme's ever seen in the last 40 minutes. I think the reason I've been reluctant to talk about it is because of the inevitability of the conclusion that this is what people like.
Yeah, I mean, it is difficult to sort of get your head around in a way. I mean, I think until recently, people would steer away from mentioning Hitler or fascism, but now over the past week, it's become, the norm in a way.
It's always been there. The evidence has always been there. But you'd have thought trying to steal an election by lying and seeking to subvert the law and breach the Constitution. And what is American patriotism in the minds of the people that want to put him back in the White House? What even is it? It's just a hatred of others. But that's who people are. They're not conned. They genuinely just hate everybody, and he gets it. He speaks to that hatred like no other.
Yeah, and he says in very simple messages as well. So I think, yes, it is hatred. It's about keeping the message simple, keeping people whipped up. Some of his base will say that they find Trump to, say things as they are, and that he's a strong man. And he gives this aura about him, which is it's diametrically opposite from what he's like.
Well, that's the mad thing. But again, and the temptation to think that, people just need to give their head a wobble is huge. But I think that's a sop. I think that's a liberal reassurance. People who don't like fascism reassure themselves that deep down, everybody dislikes fascism. We just need to work a bit harder. We need to reach out more. We need to balance things. We need to point out Kamala Harris's flaws. But actually, no. If we should have learned anything from history, if we should have learned anything from January the 6th, people love it. They're still not entirely comfortable with it. A texter who describes himself as Ray the Pie. So James O'Brien has just said all Trump supporters are fascist. For this, he should be immediately taken off the air and sacked. This is an absolute disgrace, says Ray, drowning in fascist tears. But, the point at which for anybody honest or vaguely sensible that you could deny the reality of what is being said and done is long behind us. It was probably behind us on January the 6th. But here we are. How is it happening? Answer, and correct me if I'm wrong. People love it. Kieran's in Croydon. Kieran, what would you like to say?
Yeah, so I've been too interested in the US politics because I've been fascinated by the chaotic and crazy nature of how people can buy into what essentially seems like a crazy person that might be running one of the most powerful countries in the world. And I think I've got a lot of theories, but I think I've narrowed it down to one. The psychology of, I think what happens is that over years, if you're going through life and a lot of things aren't working out for you, and you don't really understand the complexity of the political system, you kind of feel like it's all corrupt, it's all rubbish, and you want it all to kind of be torn down. Not a huge feeling, but like a small feeling where you kind of just go, another politician. You saw the debate between Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak just this year. They were kind of not answering a lot of questions, and that's the kind of feeling of, untrustable. And Trump, for example, he feels like a chaotic element.
I think you're applying things that might apply to you to people who you would ordinarily disagree with, and I think that's the mistake that we all make. You're saying,
empathy starts with projection a bit, doesn't it?
I could be living in a ditch and I wouldn't be a fascist. I would be living in a ditch and I wouldn't be comfortable in hearing people who were born somewhere else be described as degenerate or scum or whatever it could be. It's a personality type. It's not a response to stimuli. Okay, so why is Elon Musk so up for it then?
Elon Musk is, I think he's very, very much drugged up and doesn't know what's going on. And, he does know what's going on, but very selfish.
Just to be clear, you can't say that he's on drugs. You mean sort of metaphorically speaking or something like that. Or if you do mean that he's on drugs, then you can't say that. I have to categorically close that down immediately, because I'm not asking about chemicals and you've got no evidence to back that up. I'm asking about what he wants, because you can't use the analysis, people are just really unsatisfied with the political status quo. The two richest men in the world are waving him through. One of them is literally, or metaphorically, waving his pom-poms around on the stage in Madison Square Garden.
Yeah.
So that's not because they're a little bit dissatisfied.
If you're talking about people like Elon Musk and the people that would directly benefit from Trump winning, either by crazy amounts of money in contracts or just avoiding jail by being on his pardon list, then I 100% agree with you. I think there's some. I thought this was a question more about the people who aren't the elites, who are more like.
But they are, mate. They are the elite.
Yeah.
Listen, he's going to need. The people on stage in Madison Square Garden, they're elite.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
they're rich.
Yeah.
They're business people. They're they're big shot radio hosts, comedians, and you're doing what I do. You're thinking, they're part of the process of manipulation. They're not. They just love it. They love fascism, Kieran.
Oh no, I don't disagree. Of course, you're going to love fascism if you believe that it's going to give you all the power. 100%.
And for some people, power just means watching other people get carted off, watching other people get treated appallingly, watching other people get abused, get attacked. I mean, they are on the side of an adjudicated rapist. So what does that tell you about their attitude to rape? And I don't even know how relevant it is to keep pointing out how bonkers he is now. And so the nearest thing you've got to a reassuring thought is that he's not evil, he's just mad. And I can't think of many examples from history when trying to derive reassurance from that dichotomy has turned out well for anybody.
James O'Brien on LBC.
11:47 is the time. It's still not quite there. The thing that fits. That's what we're looking for. I think that's a new record, Keith. 48 minutes. That's what I finally worked out what it is I'm looking for this hour. The thing that fits. The description that fits what we're seeing, which is fascism. If you're uncomfortable with that, cry more. But the thing that fits in terms of how it happens, the thing that we have failed properly to appreciate until this point, the thing that we've danced around or fought shy of, it is close to being described by simply observing that people like it. Shiv goes a bit further. I like this. She writes, people do like fascism because they always think they are voting for fascism for others. Fascism for thee, not for me. That's part of it, isn't it? I'm not going to get deported. So your comfort with the idea of other people being deported is based entirely upon how likely you think it is that it's based on two things. How likely it is that it's you, that it could ever be you, your ability to say, oh, I don't mean you, and B, it's based on how comfortable you are simply with the idea of other human beings being dehumanized. And we know that loads of humans are comfortable with the idea of other human beings dehumanized. You could not say what Rudy Giuliani said about Palestinian people unless you had already bought into the dehumanization of Palestinian people. He talks about 2-year-olds. He is essentially greenlighting the continuing killing of children because there's no such thing as an innocent Palestinian. I told you I'd seen parallels between America and the Middle East. But it's fascism for thee and not for me, is it? Is that part of it? So, all the times we talk about racism or xenophobia or anti-immigration, which we'll probably talk about a bit tomorrow given the state of the birth rate in this country at the moment, it's mad. You step back from the news. To explain that to me, explain how it's a country that's still obsessing about immigration and watching its own birth rate go off a cliff. What are we going to start doing next? I mean, literally, what are we going to start doing next? Building people out of pipe cleaners? To plug the demographic hole that we're contemplating. But when we talk about issues like that, the number of people who say, oh, I don't mean them, or the number of people that tell us when they're dealing with a racist relative, and racism is a constituent part of fascism, although they're not synonyms. They're dealing with a racist relative or someone who is sufficiently xenophobic to have voted to damage the entire country in the hope of getting some foreigners or getting some foreigners out or seeing fewer foreigners come in. What is the phrase we always hear? What did your mother-in-law tell you on the morning after Brexit? Having told you that she voted to get rid of all the immigrants and you reminded her that you were an immigrant, what did she say? She said, oh, I don't mean you. So you take Shiv's observation, fascism for thee but not for me. They like it because they think they're voting for bad things to happen to other people. That maybe is crucial to understanding how it happens because we're all sitting here stroking our beards going, yeah, but how could people possibly be comfortable with it? Because they're absolutely certain it would never happen to them. And Ken points out Mussolini is probably a better comparison to Trump than Hitler. He was mad and bad, and many Italians loved him. They still do. Mark is in Baltimore, in Maryland. Mark, what would you like to say?
Well, hi, James. Well, before I forget, there's a great documentary on NPR called NPR on the Holocaust, which is a great thing for explaining all this.
Okay.
Personally, I feel like it's in the DNA a little bit here. You go back to anti-immigrants back in with no Irish, no Jews, no blacks back in the day, and these were immigrant people saying this. Also, the Second World War, there was America did not want to enter the Second World War, and it was very anti-British, anti-European. All these people were also people who came from other countries, and you feel like they there's so many names. I coach soccer. There's so many names on rosters of foreign names that they blissfully ignore the fact that they are an immigrant or they come from an immigrant area.
Well, Trump's parents were immigrants.
Yeah.
His grandfather, certainly.
So my neighbour's got a French surname, and he just told me this weekend he voted for Trump, and I'm horrified. This is my friend has voted for this man.
What's he voted for?
Sorry?
What's he voted for?
I wasn't sure, because I used to think that people were a little stupid or a bit ignorant or they just were gullible. Now I think they like it. Now I think they're okay with it. I've told them, my neighbours, I said, be careful what you wish for. You don't want a dictator in this country. But they don't know what a dictator is, because I didn't grow up, but obviously our parents and living in Europe and Eastern Europe, we know what it was like. And I think they're so blissfully ignorant or unaware of what it could be like. And also they don't think it'll affect them. That it's going to change, and it's a bit scary. And my wife is horrified that my neighbour, who's a good friend of ours, has just voted for this man when women's rights. And her friend had recently had a brain dead baby, and imagine the stuff that she'd have to deal with under different circumstances. My scariest thing is just going to get really nasty here, and it got nasty last time. And it's just, people just seem okay with it, James. I just don't get it. I really don't.
That's it, isn't it? Is that I mean, if you sat him down and said, what do you think you're going to get from, what is it that, then we have to stop pretending that somewhere, if you could give him a truth serum, he wouldn't say, I'm really looking forward to when they start rounding up the Haitians, or when they start deporting all the Puerto Ricans. I'll be fine, because he's never going to come.
That's the realisation I'm coming to. Yeah. That's what I'm coming to now. Yeah, people are okay with it.
Farage is a French name, mate, so I don't know how much comfort and encouragement we could take from that kind of nomenclature. Yeah. Does it change your relationship with America? Does it change the way you feel about your new home?
I really despise the Tories, James.
Sure.
I live here, and I just did not want to. I left England for a little bit of a change of life and a bit of fun and adventure. I didn't want to come back to the UK with those guys in charge, and I have got looked after in the medical system here.
Okay.
Because I am sick, but I pay for it. So I'm tempted to move, but it's too.
No, it's not over yet.
Too complicated.
It's not over yet, but you never get the lid back on completely, do you? I mean, those of us who, with incredible, I don't know if naivety is quite the right word, but just presumed that the events of January the 6th would take. So you see, 50% of the population likes him, or 50% of the electorate, right? And I always say 15 to 20% of any electorate can be persuaded to be. Can be very, very right-wing, can be very extremist, can be tempted by fascism. So that would give you, 30 to 40% of Trump's support, if it's 15 to 20% of an entire population. So then you've got 60 to 70% of Trump's support that you think is movable. And all they need to do is see the rabbit, and they'll realise what it is that they're in bed with. To mix my metaphor somewhat horribly, who wants to be in bed with a rabbit? Don't answer that question. And that is gone. There can't be anything they'll see that makes them go, good God, that was close. Look what I nearly voted for. Because January the 6th was the moment when a mob loyal to him, at his behest, went after the blood of his own vice president and the Speaker of the House. That is when Donald Trump launched an attack upon American democracy itself and lied and lied and lied again. So the question of what is it they support isn't a mystery. They love all that. They support that. It's not like there's this mystery. This is where I've got it so wrong. It's not like there's this mystery prize that they can see and I can't. And it's such a glittering and gorgeous prize that they're prepared to overlook. Oh, that's the sound of a penny dropping. I can overlook that, and I can overlook that. And obviously that was awful, but there's no mystery prize. The awfulness is the prize. 11:56 is the time mark. Stay safe. Peter is in Newcastle. Peter, what would you like to say?
Hiya, James. I'd like to answer the question in two ways, please, if I can. I think part of the problem is, albeit there's a proportion of people who are fascists and love it, I think that other people, when you say to them, Trump's a fascist, sometimes their head goes to 1945 Germany.
He's not. No, it goes to concentration camps. He's not rounding people up and putting them in gas chambers. How could you possibly call him a Nazi?
That's right.
Yes.
They should be looking at 1935 Germany, which is more akin to where he is now. So I think there's that. I think people don't really equate Trump's fascism with true fascism, if I can use those terms.
Yes.
And then I think the other thing is, You talked about percentages of the electorate. I looked at the last election in America, 66% of the electorate voted. So about 80 million went each way because it was very, very close.
Yes.
That means 80 million people are completely disengaged from the process.
That's
now,
extraordinary.
You said 80 million.
Yeah.
This is 1945 Germany. Do you want it to be horrified? But they're not seeing it. They're not seeing it because it's not cutting through. There's something about the message about the horror of Trump just doesn't cut through. And I don't know why that is.
So that explains the people staying at home. It doesn't explain the people voting for it. The people vote. We've got to stop pretending the people voting for it are focusing on some invisible prize that we can't see and therefore forgiving all the bad stuff. They're voting for the bad stuff.
I can give you another answer to that as well, though.
Go on.
You, on a call-in years and years ago, you talked about education and teaching our children critical thinking.
Yes.
And that's what we don't do. And that's how you end up where we are. We don't teach critical thinking, therefore some people believe what they're fed, and this is where we're at.
And or they ignore the evidence of their own eyes and ears, and it doesn't matter how much critical thinking they've been taught. Once you've chosen to ignore the evidence, because you don't need a PhD in critical thinking to watch what happened on January the 6th and understand what was going on, or to hear the tapes of Donald Trump talking to regional politicians and telling them, I need these votes, you've got to find me these votes, telling them to break the law in the most obvious and egregious way. And yet people who have stayed loyal or become loyal, we think, because it keeps us sane, we think, they must be forgiving all of that bad stuff because of the promise to be horrible to foreigners. And that's not a charitable analysis, but they actually love all the bad stuff, up to and including the being horrible to foreigners.
Yeah, they do.
Whew. Brecht, I'm being told by Bill in York says we need to read more Brecht. I think we do need to read a little bit more Brecht. We certainly could benefit from what they did with some of Brecht's work in the in Cabaret. I don't know, but this is what art does. It gives you an insight into things that you couldn't otherwise begin to get your head around. Cabaret's brilliant at that, actually. The young Nazi in Cabaret, who's perfectly charming and likeable, even as the Jewish grocery owner is having his business attacked, having bricks thrown through his window. That's how it happens. People like it, even if they seem to be normal pits. I'm Mark talking about his neighbour. His neighbour's not like the child catcher in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. His neighbour is not like Grot Bags, got green skin or something like that. His neighbour is still his neighbour. But now he votes for fascists because he likes it.
James O'Brien on LBC.
3 minutes after 12 is the time. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. And it is, the evidence is close to incontrovertible now. The language is almost identical. Trump is not just flirting with fascist tropes, he's absolutely punting them, and so are his supporters. Some of the clips I played you earlier of his supporters at Madison Square Garden this weekend talking about... it's so vulgar as well, but we always forget fascism is vulgar because they have nice uniforms and they make the trains run on time. There's a disgusting vulgarity here, but Trump's always been an incorrigible vulgarian. But talking about Kamala Harris as pimp handlers, these are the people that claim to be upholding values. Never more ridiculous than in the context of life being precious. Quite a lot of recommendations coming in. I'm quite proud to say, well, not that proud to say, because if you're recommending them to me, then clearly I haven't learned enough of the lessons in books like Hannah Arendt's Banality of Evil, because it's not coming across in my broadcasting. But this idea that we've spent 12 years asking luxurious questions and believing that when the light is pointed in the right direction, then Donald Trump will hemorrhage support. This is the bit. This is possibly why I didn't want to talk about it. I'm glad I have today. I'm finding this quite, what would the word be? Reassured. I'd love to understand things. That's another massive difference between Trump supporters and Trump enemies. Trump supporters don't like understanding things. They like to be told simple things, really simple things. Puerto Ricans bad, Donald Trump good. But that must be lovely. This is why the other caller was referencing critical thinking. Trying to work stuff out can feel like a burden. It can feel like torture, but you are who you are. Trying to work it out. It's great lightening of burden when you suddenly, well, of course they like it. And the effort they put into pretending that they don't is proof that they do eventually. You know, it's the left's fault, half a dozen texters are telling me. It's the fault of people like you, the divisive left, which at least means you're still capable of shame. You're still not quite ready to describe exactly what it is you see in the mirror. You're getting cross with the person who's holding up the mirror. But at least you're still disgusted by what you see in the mirror. When I hold it up, it's the left's fault. Divisive people like James O'Brien are the reason why Trump is on. Yeah, that's right. Because when you describe fascism accurately, that makes loads of people who hate fascism suddenly decide that they love it. But that's the cross I bear. Here's a mirror. Look, what do you see in the mirror? That man holding up the mirror is disgusting. Down with him and all he stands for. But that's what it is. So you do that thing where you make excuses. You reach out. You're kind. You presume that given the opportunity, everyone wants Luke Skywalker to win in Star Wars. Given the opportunity, everybody wants Maximus to win in Gladiator. Given the opportunity, everybody wants it's not called catnip. What's her name? Katniss. Everyone wants Katniss Everdeen and her friends to prevail in the Hunger Games. There's a reason why there's so much dystopian fiction around. You just grow up thinking everybody wants the plucky little rebels to win or the good guys. But some people love the fascists. Some people love Coriolanus Snow. Some people love Darth Vader. I just didn't realise there were so many of them. It is 7 minutes after 12. Lewis Goodall is in Florida, actually, in preparation for next week's result. If you're struggling to remember the date, it's really easy. Remember, all together now, the 5th of November. We'll catch up with Lewis shortly. About 12:45, actually, because of the time difference. I want him to get as much beauty sleep as possible. He's got a busy few days ahead. But there it is. There it is. Tony is in Juniper Green in Scotland. Tony, what would you like to say?
Well, hello, good afternoon.
Hello, Tony.
I'm a first-time caller, so I'm a bit nervous, but here we go.
You're very welcome. You don't sound very Scottish.
I'm not. I'm originally from London. I've only lived here 25 years.
Carry on. You'll blend in eventually. What do you want to say?
I practice. Right. With the fascists and the democracy, I think basically what it is, everyone in America at the moment is fed up with democracy because all they achieved is lies and scandals. So they will accept absolutely anything as a replacement because they don't
more lies and more scandals. The king of lies and scandals.
Oh, yeah, but they don't care about that. It's change is good.
So any change is good. Yeah, but you can't. Forgive me if I've misunderstood you. There's been so much lies and scandals and they're so cross about it, they're going to vote for the bloke who's the king of lies and scandals.
Oh, yeah, that's it.
No, that doesn't work, does it?
No, of course it does, because everyone doesn't realise or doesn't want to see that what they're going towards is going to be worse because they're used to the lies and scandals, but they think his type of lies and scandals will be better for the country.
No, they don't.
They do, because he talks to the public.
Well, he does. Well, for a start, we're literally 50-50 on this. So everyone you're describing as America and the public is literally half of them. Yeah. So that bit doesn't work. But the people that he appeals to, he clearly appeals to. And the idea that he appeals to them because they hate lies and scandals just doesn't work. You're making excuses for these people by saying, they're disillusioned or they're detached or they're disengaged. They bloody love it, Tony. They can't wait to see Puerto Rican children screaming as they're dragged into the back of paddy wagons and driven to the border. They love it. What is really hard to believe is that half of the population loves it.
No, it's not. It's not hard to believe because half of the population are delusional and they want change. You're doing what I
used to do. You're making excuses. They don't want change. Change for change's sake. They're choosing the criminal. They are choosing the adjudicated rapist. They're choosing the man who set a mob on his own vice president. This isn't just a change is as good as arrest territory. This is I love fascism, is what they're saying.
Yeah, but I don't. The thing is, because fascism hasn't been in the West for 80 plus years.
Yeah.
They don't know what fascism is. So they don't realise what they're voting for.
He keeps telling them, Tony.
Well, I agree. He keeps telling them, but they're not seeing what it is.
I will prosecute my enemies for the quotes, crime end quotes of upholding the law. I will deport people, innocent people. I will use soldiers against American citizens. I will abandon our allies. I'll use disasters to my own political game. He keeps telling them, and you're doing what I do. You're thinking, oh, they don't believe all that. They just like the fireworks, right? They like the rhetorical flourish. They like the change. They like the excitement. But no, they like what he's telling them. I do believe that. I really do. I because nothing else fits the facts. I break the numbers down. I'd love to think, 25% of his support, 50% of his support are holding their noses when they vote for him. None of them are holding their noses. They are lapping it up. It's extraordinary. Although I have to say, a few texts. Oh no, it's the same person sending several texts. But Mark agrees with you, and I quite what he's agreeing with, I'm not quite sure, which is probably my fault. Puerto Ricans, of course, are U.S. citizens. So you want evidence of what fascism is. You got his supporters jumping up on stage describing American citizens as inhabiting a floating island of trash. Renata is in Bavaria, in Germany. Renata, what made you pick up the phone?
Well, it's a very, very sad occasion to talk to you again.
Of course it is.
I'm an old German of a Jewish heritage, and so I have dealt my whole life with the question of fascism. And I just wanted to add an aspect to what you are discussing. Could it be that the more a country is praised by everybody to be the greatest, the richest, the most wonderful country on earth,
yes,
and simple people compare their personal situation to that greatness which has been told to them, that the rage becomes bigger and the wish to be part of that overwhelming power they feel their country should be, but they can't feel it. I think about what happened after the First World War in Germany. During the war, of course, everybody was told Germany is the Kaiserreich is the most important, and we will win all the wars. And then the war ended, and they came down on a realistic level. And then somebody else came up and said, today Germany belongs to us, and tomorrow the whole world will belong to us.
Yeah.
And that makes you feel as part of a greater power. And as part of that greater power, you can suddenly do all the things you always wanted to do and never could do, including really hurt other people.
So the narrative of superiority that you describe necessitates the acceptance of inferiority.
Yeah, but they don't want to be the inferiors.
No, but they can they can hear what he says about Haitians or Puerto Ricans or immigrants in general or Mexicans or Muslims or whoever it is this week. It doesn't really matter for your analysis. The more you've bought into unthinkingly the narrative of genetic superiority, accidental geographical superiority, the easier it is to buy into the narrative of inferiority.
Exactly. For me, the interesting question is, has it something to do with specific countries? The Americans have been force-fed the story about their country being the ultimate country in the world, the most powerful, and the president being the most powerful person in the world. And they want to have part of it. And with all the other politicians who kind of told them more of the truth, they never felt that they're really part of the power. And now comes something
and Trump's going to say, we're going to share it out. And they don't stop to wonder, hang on a minute, if Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk are at the front of the queue for Trump's largesse, what the heck am I going to get? But I'd suspect that if we were to look for themes, historical themes, relationship with empire, whether actual or commercial, would have something to do with it. Because you think you take great pleasure in the fact that we never elected fascists. But if you look at what some of what we did in the name of the British Empire in other countries, I'm afraid you can't carry on clinging to the notion that we were never comfortable with it. We just never inflicted it on our own people.
Yeah, and if you look at smaller countries, they have rich and poor people as well. But funny enough, those poor people don't feel so separated from greatness. Perhaps
because they're not having it fed to them, and that's where "Make America Great Again," "Make America Great Again" fits in again.
This is why it works so well,
That's amazing.
And to have part of that power is an illusion, but you force-fed them this illusion, and they believe this. For a moment, they believe this.
Yeah, and you can see why it's seductive. Are you? I think I know the answer to this, but you're comfortable now describing what we're watching as fascism?
I am. And you see, I mean, I don't want to overburden you with German examples, but we have...
They're pretty pertinent, I think, at the moment, Renat.
The right wings are much stronger in the former GDR.
Yeah, that's right, of course, in the former East.
Yeah, because they have another belief in what a country can do or can't do than the West Germans who have more than 40 years democracy behind them.
Yeah.
So they run because they don't feel that the high hopes they had after the turnaround have not been fulfilled. They now feel they have betrayed and they must go for somebody who promises them this time you will be the one
your birthright.
Gains.
You will get your genetic birthright, your nationalist birthright. You will receive what you deserve. We will make Germany great again. We will make America great again. I wonder how much of it is subconscious and how much of it is conscious. You get fed from the cradle the idea that, you know, who said being an Englishman is winning the jackpot of life? And you look at your life and you think, this doesn't look like a jackpot. And then they say, well, look at Chummo over there, recently arrived from somewhere else. That might be the reason why you haven't got your proper winnings. You haven't got your winnings. And that is how you buy into this stuff. But, of course, lots of people have made the same promise. Lots of people have shown the same injustice and imbalance and don't become fascists or fascist sympathisers. What's the difference? I don't think there is one.
James O'Brien on LBC.
18 after 12 is the time. Forgive me if this crept into Thomas's news bulletin at 12 o'clock. It's just breaking news. Manchester United have sacked Erik ten Hag. And you'll never guess who's stepping in as interim head coach, unless you know already. Go on, have a guess. Ruud van Nistelrooy. Good grief. We'll return to the conversation about Donald Trump. Well, I want to play a game with you, if I may. I want you to imagine hearing 3 or 4 of the clips that I'm about to play, possibly more. We'll go off this list first. The events of Madison Square Garden this weekend. I haven't even played you Musk, but imagine that you were listening to these in a history class 20 years from now. What do you think that class would be about? What do you think the reason would be for listening to speeches that were given 20 years ago? What do you think the theme of that class might be? Here's a radio host I hadn't heard before called Sid Rosenberg.
She is some sick that Hillary Clinton, huh? What a sick son of a The whole party, a bunch of degenerates, lowlives, Jew haters, and lowlives. Every one of them. Every one of them.
This is a comedian called Tony Hinchcliffe.
A lot going on. Like, I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico. Okay. All right. Okay. We're getting there. Again, normally I don't follow the national anthem, everybody.
This is a private equity fund manager and internet celebrity called Grant Cardone.
Ladies and gentlemen, Kamala Harris is the least qualified candidate to ever run for any political office in American history. She makes her boss look competent. She's a fake. I'm not here to invalidate her. She's a fake, a fraud. She's a pretender. Her and her pimp handlers will destroy our country. They will. They've already crippled the dollar, manufactured inflation, imported a virus, censored your voices, funded transgender surgeries, and made empty promises to the middle class for 50 years. This election has to be more than a victory. It needs to be a landslide. We need to slaughter this other people.
We need to slaughter them. It's extraordinary, right? So what do you think 20 years from now you might have been studying in class if that was on the agenda? And then the teacher perhaps would say, and of course none of these people actually served in the first Trump administration. But this man did. This man is his longest serving White House chief of staff, John Kelly.
What do you think? Do you think he's a fascist?
Well, I'm looking at the definition of fascism. It's a far-right, authoritarian, ultranationalist political ideology and movement characterized by a dictatorial leader, centralized autocracy, militarism, forcible suppression of opposition, belief in a natural social hierarchy. So certainly, in my experience, those are the kind of things that he thinks would work better in terms of running America. Again, back to this issue of, democracy is complicated, messy to operate. Probably the worst kind of government there is, except for all the other ones. I think Churchill once said that. And again, our Constitution, our founders built in to the Constitution and to the way our government operates, built in a lot of checks and balances, and didn't design the government to be streamlined and whatnot. So, but certainly the former president is in the far right area. He's certainly an authoritarian. Admires people who are dictators. He has said that. So he certainly falls into the general definition of fascist, for sure.
And just, evidence of at least just one of those elements, the general definitions of fascism, praising other dictators. Here's one example.
President Xi, I got to know him very well. He's a fierce individual. The press, the fake news, hates when I say that he's a brilliant man. He runs 1.4 billion people with an iron fist. If I say he's a brilliant man.
And I suppose on a lighter note, another person that he not only admires but seems to think is real.
I said, that's Silence of the Lamb. You know what that is? Has anybody seen Silence of the Lambs? Hannibal Lecter, how great an actor was he? You know why I like him? Because he said on television, on one of the, I love Donald Trump, so I love him. I love him. I love him. He said that a long time ago, and once he said that, he was in my camp. I was in his camp. Yeah, I don't care if he was the worst actor. I'd say he was great to me.
I'd almost offer up a prize for anyone who can explain to me what he was talking about there, but thank goodness Joe Biden with his cognitive decline is off the table. It's crazy, right? Barney's in Guildford to steer us back to the conversation we're having about what is happening. Barney, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. First-time caller.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me on. I think, personally, I don't believe that 50% of Americans are fascists. I've just got back
They're just going to vote for one.
Well, exactly. But I think it's important to understand why. And in my view, I've just got back from New York, where we had a week there with the kids, and the prices are crippling. I've spoken to a friend who lives in America recently who said that he's looking at moving his family out of California because it's too expensive.
Yeah.
And I think Americans, sadly, are facing extremely high cost of living. They've been through a period of very high inflation. Donald Trump is offering them, offering to focus on that. He's pointing out how bad a job Kamala Harris has done. He's got in Elon Musk, who everybody, I think, mistakenly think is an all-round genius. And therefore they think, well, these guys are saying he's going to be good for business. Good for business means good for me, good for my pocket. And frankly, we've seen with so many things that Donald Trump said and done over the years, no one cares. They just care about what's, their own quality of life.
Yeah, I'd love to agree with you. I really would, because if all the speeches, all the people standing up were talking about that, I think you'd have a bit more mileage if they were talking about the cost of living instead of talking about Hillary Clinton or Puerto Rico or Kamala Harris's pimp handlers needing to be slaughtered. And that's the problem, is that I think you're probably reacting as you think you might react if you were American. I'd be so concerned about the cost of living. But there's no planet on earth where your concerns about the cost of living can be so acute that you're comfortable with a politician who's promising to, deport people for no reason, use the army on his own population, and has already demonstrated that he's a multiple felon and he will lie in the most unbelievable fashion about actual election results. You're doing what I did until today. You're applying rules of normality to an abnormal situation.
I think it's just trying to reconcile the fact that, I've used to work 1 week a month in America. They're generally good people.
Of course they are.
I
So are
can't
Germans.
understand.
So are Italians.
Yeah, no, of course.
And they both elected fascists.
Just trying to understand how and the world, frankly, gone to pot with Ukraine and what's happening with Israel.
Well, you know what side he'd be on in that. He'd be doing whatever Putin wanted him to do by tea time on his first day in the White House. So you can make a case for saying people don't care enough about that, and you'd probably be true. But the reason they don't care enough about it is not because of the cost of living in New York. It's that they like what he offers, and what he offers is hate. What he offers is fascism. And we're still a bit shy of admitting it or acknowledging it.
I mean, I hope that's not the case, because it would certainly kind of degrade my faith in humanity if that was so. But
history teaches you that that's what happens. I mean, how many people in Germany were comfortable with Hitler's rise to power because of hyperinflation? Answer, some. But if you'd showed them the Holocaust at the time of hyperinflation, would they have made the same calculation?
Well, you certainly hope not.
You hope not, but, Hitler told them exactly what he was before he started doing the truly heinous things. They just chose to either not believe him or to look the other way. I hope I go back to being like you, Barney, tomorrow, because it's a slightly nicer place to be than where I am at the moment, which is watching the figures, watching the numbers, wondering what it will take for people to disown him and realising that there is nothing.
Yeah, I just wonder if more blame, and obviously I'm terrified of the thought of a second Trump presidency, and I hope the Democrats get in. But I think the Democrats have been pretty weak, and I wonder if Trump's strength is more the Democrats' weakness than actually 50%.
But how have they been weak? What do you mean they've been weak?
Well, I know I'm no expert, James, but on it, they are seen to be weak on the economy, on immigration, on
the economy's done great guns under Biden, compared to almost every other market in the world.
Yeah, but I forget the statistics.
3.4% growth during the first 3 years of his presidency. Labour market, incredibly low unemployment. I mean, Donald Trump keeps telling people that they've done badly, but they haven't. He kept telling people he won the election in 2020, and guess what? Newsflash, he didn't.
Exactly. But you've got people like Elon Musk behind him, so people believe his rhetoric. And at the end of the day, people see that their prices have gone up at supermarkets a huge amount. So that's what worries the average man on the street, sadly, more than how Puerto Rican immigrants are going to be treated. You cling to that, and I don't mean that in a condescending fashion,
because I wish I could, and I think I probably would have done once, but why then dedicate so much of your energy and attention to talking about Puerto Rican immigrants or Haitians eating pet dogs and cats in Springfield, Ohio? Why? If you're not appealing to the basest elements of people. And then you're left with that calculation that we talked about all of this hour, which is how many people are holding their nose. That's what you're saying, Barney, isn't it? You think they must be holding their nose about the really ugly stuff because they care so much about the cost of living stuff.
Yeah,
how hard would you have to hold your nose?
Well, I just wouldn't do it.
No, exactly, and they do. So even if there was a scintilla of truth in the nose-holding theory, what you just said then, well, I just wouldn't do it, is probably the more powerful takeaway. It's 12:30. Amelia Cox is here with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:33 is the time. I think it's a good time to play you this, actually. This is an interview I did at the end of last week with Yulia Navalnaya, the widow of Alexei Navalny, murdered, of course, by Vladimir Putin, using the same methods that he and his goons sought to deploy in the pursuit of the Skripals, the father and daughter in Salisbury in this country, which left a British woman, Dawn Sturgis, dead. And as you know, the wishes of Vladimir Putin when it comes to the American presidential election remain pretty clear, crystal clear, in fact. They're exactly the same as the wishes of Elon Musk, who was reported as being in contact with Putin. It also reported, of course, that Trump had been in constant contact with him over his period of opposition. I'd leave you to wonder why. But this is an extraordinary story and an extraordinary woman who is the widow of an extraordinary man. It is an extraordinary book, Yulia, and it's very hard to categorise, not least because it's in distinct parts. Can I begin with the thing that surprised me most?
Of course.
It's very funny.
It is.
Because
Because
Alexei.
my husband was very funny, yes.
And that comes across in the writing. People will be surprised by that because the subject matter is so serious.
I know.
And you hear his voice. Even for those of us who were not familiar with his voice, there is a very strong voice that comes through the book. And it takes you through the extraordinary journey of his life, which many people listening to us now will not be aware of. So I'll ask you some questions that I fear you will have answered before. But why him? Why did Alexei feel that it fell to him to take this stand against Vladimir Putin's regime and to be this tireless thorn in the side of one of the most dangerous men on earth?
It doesn't work like by him. You start to be involved in politics. You understand that you got much more and more supporters every day. You understand that you are doing the right things, and you become the leader one day. It's not by him. Finally, the answer is, it's my husband, and it's Alexei Navalny, because he was really true leader. He was able to attract people. He was able to explain people what is good and what is bad. It was Alexei Navalny because people loved him and people believed him.
And why did he feel that injustice so keenly? Because so many people in Russia either don't feel it or they look the other way.
I think that a lot of people feel this injustice even from government side. But unfortunately, a lot of people in Russia want to be silent. And I think that because of Vladimir Putin, he tried to teach and to show people for last 25 years, if you are not involved in politics, if you're not trying to fight with us, if you are closing eyes on our corruption, then you can live your normal life every day and nobody will touch you. I think that's the answer.
You mentioned 25 years of campaigning, of activism, of journalism, of politics. That's almost also roughly the length of your marriage. I think this is not a coincidence.
It's coincidence, of course.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think that you maybe were the final piece of his jigsaw.
Well, it happened. We married when we were 24, and almost at the same year, Putin became a president. And you're right that our marriage continued as long as Putin's presidency. It really was coincidence. But I've seen him day after day, how he works hard to become more prominent politician, more, it's not the right word involved, but he was all the time very much close to people. And as you know, Putin, he never participates in any public events. All people around him are Secret Service agents or prepared people or actors. And my husband, when he announced that he is going to participate in presidential campaign, he did many rallies. And it wasn't just one rally or 1 month. He was doing it more than 1 year. So he did these rallies in a lot of big and small cities in Russia. And at this every meeting, he was very close to people, and people were able to see the difference between politicians. One is somewhere and never meets people, and another meets with people every week in different cities. And especially if to talk about cities and towns far away from Moscow, for people it was something. Finally, somebody came to them to speak with them and to listen to them.
And yet, with every success, the risk increases. The risk to him increases.
That's true. I don't think it's all the time works the same with Putin. I think that he tries to put a pressure on every person who is opposing him, but it was obvious for my husband and for me as well that at that time you need to be even stronger than before, because if you show that to Putin that you are weak, that you are open for a kind of negotiations or something like this, the pressure of Putin will increase.
You have to be fearless. You have to
absolutely, of course, and
fearlessness.
My husband was absolutely fearless.
And I suppose that was never more evident than in the decision to return to Moscow after the first poisoning, when he was sort of rescued essentially and taken to hospital in Germany. Some of the most difficult parts of the book are when he writes about you and your children, and when he writes about them visiting him in hospital and not being able to cuddle them because he was full of tubes. But I don't know that there is a better description of courage than his determination to go back. Did you ever try and dissuade him?
I never tried to persuade him. I knew that my husband wants to live in his country. He is an innocent person. Why he should live in exile. I knew my husband wants to be a Russian politician. I knew that my husband wants to do all these good changes for Russia, and I knew that he was sure it's not possible to do from abroad at this time, and he wanted to be close to his supporters and the people.
He becomes more than a man, doesn't he? He becomes a symbol. It becomes a rallying point, and you can't be a rallying point if you're not there.
That's true.
Even if you're in prison.
Of course, it's very important, and that's why people supported him. That's why people liked him and loved him, because they knew that he is one of them, and it was very difficult for not for him, for everyone, to be sometimes to take very difficult decisions, but still he was. I think that he was very right in this, and I can understand why he wanted to come back. It's very difficult for me now to discuss it,
yes.
But coming back to 2021, after we spent several months in Germany, I knew at that time that there is just one decision which he is going to take at that moment.
Despite knowing that the imprisonment was guaranteed, and then not long afterwards, of course.
It's not like guaranteed, and it's not like crazy bravery of my husband. It's about your beliefs, and it's about his beliefs and his political beliefs and his beliefs for good changes. But it's also about we don't need and we knew this for a long time, that we don't need to take a look at Putin. Nobody knows what will come in his mind. Nobody knows.
There's no logic.
He just, my husband, innocent person, wants to come back to his homeland. And it's like very, very simple decision.
And Alexei writes about how Putin changes the rules all the time.
Of course, he all the time lies. He all the time changes rules. That means that we need everybody inside country who against Putin, and all the West just do whatever we think the right thing, and not to turn to the Putin decisions or to think and to find logic in Putin's steps.
What do you want this book to do? What are your dreams for this book?
Of course, I would love that this book become kind of famous book. I would love a lot of people read it. I think that everybody will find something new about my husband. People who knew him from YouTube show and from his investigations or from the film, they will find something new for them as well. And people who never knew about him, I would love, especially after he's killed by Vladimir Putin, keeping his voice loud. It's very important for me.
How involved were you in the composition of the book, Yulia?
I was involved to get everything, these diaries and these parts of the book, and I was more involved in Russian version because finally I decided to publish it by myself. It was a very interesting process. I enjoyed it a lot, and editions in Russian version and English version, they're a little bit different.
How easy is it, if I was living in Russia, to get hold of this?
It's very difficult.
Right. Why? What would I have to do?
Our organization and my husband and me, actually, we are called extremists.
Yes.
That's why nobody knows, again, what will come in their mind. Probably they will do nothing, but if they want, they can do anything, I don't know, to open criminal case because of this book.
I think I know more, well, I do know more now of what sustained him, of where he got his hope. There's a very powerful explanation of the two things he uses to dispel despair. He uses the old question of what is the very worst thing that can happen, and he talks about how you were involved in that process, and then he writes very casually about religion. I like the way he just says that you don't have to believe that some dude parted the sea. You just have to. That helps hold him together in jail. But what about hope for the actual change? The hope for the removal of the regime, hope for the end of Putin. Where do you and he find that?
I wanted to start from the faith of my husband, which you mentioned, because you're very right that he wasn't just religious man. Everything which he was able and wanted to bring to people, it was very easy. And the same with faith. It's not like, he was religious person, but he wanted to bring this faith and to explain his faith with very, very simple words. And of course, I believe that democratic changes in Russia will come one day. I couldn't promise you that these changes will come tomorrow.
Of course.
Or in 2 months.
But you have to believe they will come.
Right, of course. It's about beliefs. It's about the not to give up. It's about the things that we need to do every day, something to make this Putin's regime fallen and to continue the fight. It's very, strong word. It's probably about my husband, but for all the people around, just not to give up and to continue to do something.
This is, in some ways, the heart of the book, isn't it? Because this isn't Hollywood. This isn't, an easily achieved mission. And he writes about how long the USSR was established. He writes about North Korea and China still being oppressive dictatorial regimes. He is under no illusions about a quick solution, even as some people around him say to him, it'll be over in a year, it'll be over in 2 years. So the extraordinary element of his life, his campaigning, his work, is that thing you've just described, the fact that he just will keep taking small chips out of the edifice. He can't blow it up. He can't blow it up.
It's not just you're a very talented person.
Yes.
It's also about hard work every day. And if you put together, for sure, my husband was very talented politician, but it's just not about talent. It's about every day's work.
And for people who don't know, the variety of the work that he did was very special as well. I mean, the famous film that he made of Putin's sort of disgusting palace where money is coming out of the taps, isn't it? It's just the most vulgar thing you've ever seen. Because I think he understood that these people hate nothing more than being laughed at.
He did a lot of anti-corruption investigations because, unfortunately, we live. And Russia is such a country where you can do this investigation against every government minister and every official. They are all very corrupted. They are billionaires. They own private jets, yachts, villas. And that's absolutely crazy situation. And this situation all the time made crazy my husband, and he wanted to fight with this regime who steals money from their own people.
And that brings us back to that burning sense of injustice with which we began the conversation. I like some of the lines about Putin, the bribe-taking old man, a vengeful runt. How much, I don't know how much is lost in translation. I hope not much. I feel that I could hear his voice even in English.
That's true, and a lot of people with whom I speak now, they say that they can hear his voice.
That's special.
It's very important for me, and it was much easier to keep it in Russian. But to keep it in different languages, it's very hard, and I'm very happy and I'm very thankful to translators that it happened so.
And in many ways, the other question that I asked you, Alexei answered himself, and then what you hope the book to do. And he just said, if they do finally whack me, this will be my memorial.
That's awful, but it's true. And in this case, I would say, I will try to find the right word, satisfied that we have something to bring to the world and to ask the world to remember about my husband.
Yulia, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
James O'Brien on LBC.
53, that book, Patriot, by Alexei Navalny, is available now. Let's go to Florida. Let's go to Miami, Florida, where Louis Goodall is, it's where he is, preparing to cover the American election, which, of course, remember the 5th of November. Louis, it says here you saw Trump and Harris supporters clash yesterday.
Yes, that's right, James. We were actually covering a Hispanic event, Republican Hispanic event in Miami-Dade County, which was a sort of get out of the vote operation. Not really actually for the presidential level, because Florida, for various reasons we might want to get into, has become less and less competitive presidentially. It's become more and more Republican, but there's a very important Senate race here. And there was a bit of an altercation, not physical, but certainly basically the Democratic candidate appeared at the same time, and you had this sort of extraordinary kind of scene of different sets of Hispanic voters basically sort of shouting at each other, sort of calling each other socialist or fascist or whatever it happened to be. And what was sort of interesting in itself, but what was astonishing about it in a way, or extraordinary about it, is that we realized later at exactly the same time, of course, or pretty much at the same time, an hour later, Madison Square Garden in the Trump event last night, sort of closing rally event for him, there were of course all of these jokes being made about Hispanic voters, about Puerto Rico being a garbage island, and all of this sort of thing, a dump. And it sort of brings home to you the sort of one of the weird things about this election, which is, if most of the polling is to be believed, albeit not all of it, but if most of the polling is to be believed, Hispanic Latino voters are in increasing numbers moving to the Republican Party and moving to Donald Trump. And it's you've talked about this thing many times before on your show, when I was talking to some of the people, voters, and sort of party members out canvassing for him yesterday, and saying, how do you feel when you look back at the sort of things he used to say about, Mexicans coming, sending rapists and all that sort of stuff? And they say, well, he didn't say that. He didn't say it. I was like, no, but he definitely did say it. And, that's the thing, the sort of cognitive dissonance of that is still very, very profound. And so,
does it change? Do you think this rally is going to make any difference to anything, first of all, but to that in particular specifically?
Well, clearly for people, as we know, James, clearly for people who have drunk the Trump Kool-Aid, and he's probably branded that, for people who are the most sort of resolute Trump backers, yes. Clearly not, because we just know
they love it.
It's
they
like
love it
different
all.
Realities.
Yeah,
I think that's right. It's just a sort of completely different reality, like it just doesn't go in. I mean, and that was the sort of weirdness of yesterday in a way. You ended up kind of putting the footage out later, but you've got these sort of Democrats and Republican sort of hyper-polarized people kind of absolutely screaming at each other, a sort of inch away from each other's noses, not obviously in any way internalizing anything that the other person is saying. And that is what American politics is, right? But in terms of whether the Puerto Rico stuff and the stuff at Madison Square Garden, whether it might have a slightly bigger impact on the relatively slender numbers of still undecided voters, I think yesterday was a reminder about some of the worst excesses of the sort of MAGA and Trump movement, right? You can hardly, any clips that emerge from it when you're talking about the kind of racist sort of language or insults about political figures and so on, anyone who was wavering around Trump, it might make some difference around the edges. And let's not forget as well, just on the Puerto Rico thing, which might seem a modest thing in it of itself, insulting Puerto Ricans. There are 1.1 million Puerto Ricans living in Florida. There are 500,000 living in Pennsylvania. And of course, in an election by such fine margins, that sort of stuff does matter.
You're going to take us right up to the wire, actually, because you came on a little late as a consequence of my interview with Yulia Navalnaya. But what are you looking out for while you're there? As you say, the number of people whose votes are still up for grabs is vanishingly small, isn't it? Probably.
Yeah, indeed. James, the thing that we're trying to do in Florida this week is a little bit different maybe to some of the sort of traditional sort of pre-week problem, because pre-week sort of reportage, because in a way, as you know, you can do these elections and sort of go to swing states and so on. You can talk to 1,000 people, 10,000 people, but in an election which is so utterly as tight as it is, you, in the end, don't get much of a sense of it. The point of coming somewhere like Florida is to try and answer the question which I get asked all the time, and I'm sure you get asked all the time on your show as well, which is, how is Trump still in the race? This is what most British people looking at this race just thinks. Like, they look at it and they're like, given everything that has happened, both when he was president and since he's been left office, how can he still be in this race? And Florida is actually the place where one of the best places to answer that question, because it is basically the kind of conceptual home of MAGA and MAGAism. It used to be a swing state, but partly because of Trump and the effect that he's had on American politics, it has further and further moved towards the sort of Republican column and Trumpism. So the thing that I'm sort of trying to get my head around this week is not what's going to happen, because frankly, like, we'll find out in a week or so anyway. Sure. So what's the point in trying to divine it? But try to understand how he could still even be competitive given everything we know about him.
I should listen with interest. But podcast dropping every day?
Of course.
Every day. The news agents featuring Lewis Goodall, Emily Maitlis and John Sopel. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, where you can also pause and rewind live radio, as well as listen to a range of podcasts. For example, The News Agents. Download it now for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Ben Kentish is in for Tom Swarbrick at 4:00 today. But Sheila Fogarty has gone nowhere.
James O'Brien on LBC.